Rosetta Cazelle, a red-haired noblewoman with a twisted nature, ruined anything she could not possess. The one thing Rosetta desired above all else was the silver-haired crown prince, Sahel von Idris. At a grand banquet, Rosetta watches the aloof silver-haired prince from across the crowded ballroom. Rosetta's obsession went beyond his beauty or the imperial status he represented. Though she coveted the mythical heart of the earth, her true desire was far more unusual. These precious treasures were nothing compared to the secret curse she sought to exploit. Rosetta's ultimate goal was Sahel, who was cursed to transform into a wolf during a full moon. Rosetta craved a companion who transformed into a beast, seeking to claim the cursed prince as her own. Mesmerized by his beastly silver fur and gold eyes, Rosetta resolved to secure her position as crown princess. Rosetta's obsessive ambition threatened to bind the cursed prince in a web of dark dependency. However, Sahel's heart already belonged to another woman, frustrating Rosetta's designs. The cursed prince shared a deep, fated connection with his chosen companion. Repulsed by Rosetta, the prince turned away to seek solace with his true mate. Spurned and bitter, Rosetta resolved to alter her strategy to force his compliance. Rosetta planned to strip the prince of his royal inheritance to force him to turn to her. She did not care what damage she caused as long as her ultimate plan succeeded. With a single decisive stroke, she began severing the prince's ties to his destiny. Driven by a destructive obsession, Rosetta used ruthless manipulation to push Sahel into a corner. Her possessiveness consumed her entirely, leaving no room for morality or mercy. Fitting for a tragic villain, Rosetta's dark path ultimately led to her bloody demise. She met her end at the hands of Sahel, the very man she desired. Like all classic villains, she accepted her grim fate with a chilling smile. Suddenly, a servant's touch pulls her back to reality, asking if she is all right. She realizes with horror that she has somehow transmigrated into the body of Rosetta Cazelle. She laments her bizarre situation, having overnight become a doomed villainess in a web novel. Terrified of her predetermined fate of decapitation, she desperately tries to keep her composure. She deduces that the original Rosetta passed away, leaving an empty vessel for her soul. Although she questions why she was chosen, she knows she cannot return to her past life. Her memories of her own sudden death in the modern world remain terrifyingly vivid. She vividly recalls the crushing impact of a truck while she was crossing the street. Now she marvels that this new body is completely uninjured despite her traumatic memory of death. Looking at her reflection, she remains stunned by her own striking and unfamiliar face. Even after a week, she is still overwhelmed by the incredible beauty of her new form. She notices that even a slate frown makes her gaze appear incredibly cold and intimidating. Her cold expression accidentally intimidates her maid, who nervously offers to change her hairstyle. To reassure her anxious maid, Rosetta smiles warmly and encourages her to proceed. The maid begins gently braiding the long, vibrant red locks of her mistress. Since she is stuck in this body, she resolves to make the most of this second chance. Though Rosetta's life is luxurious, her future holds a terrible doom she must somehow avoid. She sits in contemplation, trying to recall the exact timeline of the novel's events. The original plot began when the heroine, Liliana, briefly lifted the prince's wolf curse. The prince imprinted on Liliana, and Rosetta was destined to confront them at the academy. According to the novel, witnessing their bond was the catalyst for Rosetta's descent into homicidal jealousy. Since she has arrived long before the tragic climax, she intends to survive and live peacefully. A voice suddenly breaks her reverie, asking if she is pleased with her new acquisition. Turning around, Rosetta gasps in absolute shock at what has been brought before her. Her red-haired brother proudly presents a caged white wolf, assuming it is her favorite plaything. She realizes the captive is not an ordinary beast, but a rare silver wolf. In horror, she remembers that only one person in the Empire can take this form. Rosetta stares in dread at the snarling chained beast, recognizing him instantly as the cursed Prince Sahel. Confused by this unexpected development, the red-haired noblewoman struggles to make sense of his presence. She fears meeting an untimely demise before the novel's original timeline can even begin. Heavy silence fills the dimly lit room as she slumps despondently on the sofa. Clutching the ornate silver key, she anxiously wonders how her life went so off track. A frustrated grimace crosses her face as she struggles to process this sudden, terrifying nightmare. Her smirking, red-haired brother mockingly encourages her to tame the ferocious beast for her own amusement. Collapsing back onto the sofa, she completely dismisses the absurd idea of taming the dangerous creature. Looking up in despair, she deeply regrets her arrogance in handling this precarious situation. In the original plot, the villainess had ruthlessly hunted the wolf, unaware of his identity. She realizes the original Rosetta had captured the prince long before the story's actual heroine did. Amplified by a cruel trap, the prince's wolf curse had permanently trapped him in beastly form. Since Rosetta had never seen his human form, she wonders how she recognized him as the prince. It remains a complete mystery how she could identify him based solely on his wolf form. A piercing yellow glare from the darkness reveals the unmistakable eyes of the cursed wolf prince. The original Rosetta's sharp observation of his golden eyes had instantly confirmed his royal identity. Her happiness quickly rotted into mad jealousy upon witnessing the heroine standing by the prince's side. To avoid her doom, she had feigned illness to entirely avoid the dangerous royal hunt. Her plan shattered upon learning her brother, Renoa, had caught the wolf anyway, trapping her. An ominous web of fate tightens around her, threatening to strangle any hope of a peaceful life. She glares at the silver key, feeling as if a deadly bomb was dropped right before her. With a sudden clink, she throws the dangerous key onto the hard stone floor in disgust. Letting out a heavy sigh, she tries to calm her racing heart amid the rising tension. Annoyed by the loud, relentless banging, she demands the raging caged beast to quiet down immediately. Covering her ears, she angrily questions why the beast directs all of his fury towards her. A menacing growl reverberates through the room as the white wolf bares his sharp fangs. The swift scrape of wood, she firmly pulls up a chair and sits before him. Maintaining her composure, she coldly asks the snarling beast if he truly harbors hatred for her. The wolf responds with another low, hostile snarl, tightening the heavy chain around his neck. Staring directly into the cage, she bluntly declares that the feeling of intense dislike is mutual. Twirling her vibrant red hair, she hopes they can finally establish some semblance of rational communication. She remembers that the prince only regains his sanity after imprinting on the story's true heroine. A thunderous roar shakes the bars as she asks if he wishes to be set free. She nervously offers to release him on the condition that he promises not to eat her. A sudden crackle of fierce lightning illuminates the dark cage as his golden eyes glow intensely. The majestic silver wolf stands his ground, surrounded by a terrifying aura of crackling electricity. Raising her hands defensively, she desperately begs the electrified beast to calm down and settle. With bared fangs, the wolf issues a final threatening warning to cease her foolish chatter. Staring at the terrifying dark shadow, she realizes dealing with this volatile beast is incredibly dangerous. Seeing his savage hunger, she resolves to keep him safely locked up until his curse lifts. She nervously contemplates the fact that the curse-breaking heroine will not arrive for an entire month. The daunting prospect of surviving alongside this violent beast for a month fills her with dread. She sighs, watching the beast rest and wondering if he truly cannot comprehend her words. Overwhelmed by frustration, she laments that she lacks the heroine's magical curse-breaking abilities. She wishes she could break the curse herself to end this constant state of anxiety. Only the talented witch Liliana Manu possesses the unique power required to shatter the imperial curse. According to the novel, the Wolf Prince would escape in a month and find Liliana. In their fated meeting, the gentle heroine would instantly recognize him and break his curse. Having spent too long as a beast, the sudden transformation would lead to complications. The romantic aftermath of their meeting was destined to take a highly scandalous turn. She shudderingly realizes that touching him without the proper magic would result in a horrific tragedy. Worried about her potential doom, Rosetta fears her future could turn into a gory horror movie. Realizing they must endure a month together, Rosetta laments how dirty her red shoes have become. She resolves not to obsess over Sihale, hoping they can quietly coexist until his curse lifts. She decides to act as his temporary protector, watching over him for a month until Liliana arrives. Reassuring herself, she resolves to treat the situation simply like taking care of a pet dog. Observing the resting silver wolf, Rosetta suddenly notices his state and wonders if he is injured. She notes the brutal wounds inflicted by the Empress's assassin Renoa and the iron cage bars. Understanding he is delirious with aggression, she plans to treat his wounds to build trust. She tells the wolf to wait calmly and is amused when he responds with a yelp. Smiling, Rosetta feels a sense of relief as she turns to leave the cell. She walks away from the cage, leaving the dark cellar behind her. A sudden chill washes over her, prompting a tense backward glance in the quiet corridor. Her sharp demand for silence echoes loudly from the windows of the Grand Family estate. Carrying a plate, Rosetta carefully makes her way back down the dimly lit stone stairs. From the shadows of his cage, the silver wolf warily watches her approach. Rosetta presents a plate of fresh, raw meat, announcing that it is time to eat. She watches the beast from a safe distance behind the heavy, cold iron bars. She remarks how much more pleasant the silver wolf is when he remains quiet. With a sudden, savage growl, the beast lunges, forcing her to defensively tell him to wait. The wolf aggressively snaps his jaws against the rattling chains, demanding his meal. She notes how his focus has shifted from wariness of her to pure obsession with the meat. She quietly observes the wolf happily devouring his food, noting how much he has changed. Reflecting on their 3 days together, she wonders if they are actually growing closer. She admits she is starting to view the cursed prince as a real person and friend. She never expected to open her heart to an animal she was simply feeding. She sweats at the humorous mental image of herself acting as a personal waiter to the wolf. Rosetta despairingly realizes that to the beast, everything, including herself, is probably just seen as meat. She sighs in frustration, unsure when she will ever be viewed as more than food. She suddenly pauses as another unexpected change catches her attention. She notices that the wolf's aggressive barking has significantly decreased lately. The constant deafening noise finally ceased 2 days ago, bringing a welcome peace. She realizes the prince's relative quietness might stem from his fear of starving. She remains cheerful, knowing previous healers fled in terror after trying to tranquilize the beast. Squatting by the bars, she treasures this quiet, peaceful moment with the resting wolf. Noting his incredible resilience, she asks the healing wolf if he is feeling any better. With a bright smile, Rosetta tells the wolf she is going to have her dinner too. The wolf's bright golden eye gleams as he silently watches her walk away. Finally settling down, the white wolf drifts off to sleep under the starlit sky. At dinner, Rosetta is shocked to find her red-haired brother suddenly sitting across from her. Rosetta demands to know what Lenoa is doing there since he is rarely at home. She notes she hasn't seen him since she took over responsibility for the captive prince. Lenoa smugly reminds her of his free-spirited nature as a wandering traveler. Untroubled by inheritance duties, Lenoa had spent his life wandering wherever his heart desired. His transient lifestyle made him a minor character with very little relevance in the original novel. When Lenoa asks if she has named the wolf, Rosetta is caught completely off guard. Lenoa insists that she must give the beast a name, finding her lack of one excessive. Forcing a polite smile, Rosetta grits her teeth as she is urged to choose a name. When Lenoa teases her about having fun, she angrily points out he captured the wolf. Rosetta freezes in shock when her brother suddenly offers to take the wolf back. She fears that if Lenoa takes him, he will abuse the prince, mimicking the original Villainess timeline. Rosetta fears that the prince will ruthlessly assassinate Lenoa to protect his royal secrets. She swells hard, realizing her brother's headed toward a completely doomed, tragic end. Trying to save his life, she vehemently warns Lenoa never to touch the wolf. A sudden snap echoes as Rosetta's frustration bends her dining fork out of shape. With a sudden, aggressive movement, she stuffs a large piece of meat into Lenoa's mouth. Rosetta calmly sips her wine while her brother desperately chokes on his food. Lenoa gasps that she is trying to murder him, but Rosetta ignores his complaints. Soft footsteps click against the cold stone steps as Rosetta makes her way down. Holding a glowing lantern, Rosetta slowly descends the dark, quiet stairs back to the basement. A sharp clink sounds as the wolf's golden eye warily watches her from the dark cage. Peer-pressured by her presence, the white wolf growls, questioning if she has returned again. She drags a wooden chair across the floor, sitting directly in front of his cage. Rosetta informs the wolf that she's going to test out a few temporary names. The beast yawns loudly as she explains she cannot call him by his royal name. The wolf responds with a low growl, clearly showing his immense dislike for her suggestions. Rosetta softly tests out various names, whispering both Sihel and Shahel to see his reaction. Hearing the name Shahel, the white wolf perks up with a sudden glimmer of interest. Rosetta stands up and smiles down at him, noticing his positive reaction to the name. Rosetta cheerfully declares that his temporary name will officially be Shasha from now on. As Shasha issues a low grumble, Rosetta gently asks him to listen to her commands. Walking away, Rosetta feels satisfied that they are slowly but surely growing much closer. In the dark corridor, Rosetta looks back at Shasha resting quietly behind his iron bars. The scene transitions to a grand, sunlit room filled with golden ornaments and curtains. Released from his cage, Shasha cautiously sniffs the air in the luxurious new room. The white wolf wanders around the bright room, exploring his elegant new surroundings. Shasha glares back at the door where Rosetta and her maid Marina are standing. Rosetta stands proudly, feeling incredibly pleased with her decision to relocate the royal beast. Perking his head up, Shasha looks around in surprise at a sudden visual distraction. He discovers a beautifully patterned blue cushion on the floor, designed for his comfort. With a satisfied sigh, the wolf comfortably rests his chin on the soft cushion. Watching the wolf, Rosetta and her maid Marina discuss the wolf's lavish new living arrangements. Marina nervously scratches her head, wondering if this royal treatment is too much for a dog. Rosetta instructs Marina to prepare the adjacent room for Shasha, which deeply shocks the maid. Marina protests that it is too dangerous, but Rosetta demands she secure it like a prison. Smiling coldly, Rosetta insists the room must be large and secure enough to prevent escape. Framed by elegant roses, Rosetta sinisterly asks Marina if she can handle the task. Although Marina laments ruining two beautiful rooms, she is relieved to see her lady satisfied. Marina suddenly asks Rosetta what she should do with the heavy iron cage muzzle. Marina holds up the heavy wire muzzle, asking if she should fasten it on him. A narration block reveals that the servants forgot how to use the muzzle out of laziness. Shasha growls on his cushion while Rosetta decides he should be fine without a muzzle. Rosetta shakes her head, ordering Marina to clean the muzzle and prepare it for walks. Marina gasps in complete shock, highly alarmed by the dangerous idea of taking Shasha for walks. Rosetta smiles warmly, explaining that they cannot keep the poor beast locked up forever. Marina stares in sheer disbelief as Rosetta casually dismisses the volatile nature of the beast. Slinking away in defeat, Marina laments that villainesses truly do whatever they want. Rosetta claps her hands, ordering Marina to prepare a collar, name tag, and tracking spell. Smiling mysteriously, Rosetta explains that someone dangerous might be looking for her royal wolf. Marina's expression darkens as she sinisterly offers to assassinate anyone searching for the wolf. Rosetta nervously reminds Marina that even as a former elite assassin, she cannot do that. Rosetta acknowledges her ultimate opponent is the Empress, steeling her resolve against her. Rosetta worries about the Empress discovering the silver wolf, but hopes distance will delay the rumors. She fears that if the Empress locates Sihel, she would immediately send an assassin. She also worries the Empress might try to claim ownership and capture the prince. Rosetta reassures herself that Sahil is strong enough to defeat any potential assassin. She reiterates her strong desire to avoid getting entangled with the dangerous Empress. Rosetta silently pleads for things to resolve peacefully, deeply detesting annoying and complex situations. Despite his hero status, she resolves to protect him from the Empress until the heroine arrives. Admitting her growing fondness for the wild wolf, she refuses to let him suffer under the Empress. A sudden, ferocious bark echoes as Shasha snaps at Rosetta, shocking everyone nearby. Looking at the mess, Rosetta exasperately asks the white wolf why he is having another tantrum. She complains about his rudeness, realizing that removing the cage's magic to prevent injuries made him too hyperactive. Rosetta firmly points at him, declaring herself his owner and warning him that rudeness will not be tolerated. Low growl rumbles from Shasha, but Rosetta stands her ground, dismissing his attempts to intimidate her. The wolf responds with an incredibly deafening bark, forcing Rosetta and her maids to cover their ears. As the loud barking continues, Rosetta lets out a tired, heavy sigh in deep frustration. Taking a deep breath, Rosetta prepares to scream back at the noisy beast. Rosetta loudly screams that she is his owner, her voice shaking the entire estate and deafening her maids. Rosetta immediately regrets yelling, groaning in pain because she cannot stand the noise either. Shasha turns his head away, continuing to issue low, defiant growls from behind the bars. A loud crash sounds as Lenoa kicks the door open, angrily demanding that she shut the dog up. Rosetta turns back in annoyance while Shasha dismissively snorts at her brother's angry outburst. The terrified maids weep in relief, grateful that someone is finally complaining about the endless noise. When Rosetta claims she is disciplining the wolf, her brother retorts that it just sounds like pure noise. Rather than stopping, Rosetta cheerfully praises Shasha for barking loudly at her annoying brother. Lenoa covers his face in sheer disbelief, utterly exasperated by his sister's ridiculous behavior. As Shasha barks louder, Lenoa desperately covers his ears, deeply regretting bringing the wild beast home. Rosetta playfully shrugs off the chaotic situation, leaving the noisy mansion behind as the scene transitions. Quiet falls over the room as Shasha sleeps, while Rosetta sits on a nearby couch thinking. Rosetta silently prays for success while holding a training manual on how to tame fierce dogs. She recalls instantly knowing this specific dog training book was the perfect solution to her problems. The book's legendary author is known for turning any ferocious beast into a completely docile lamb. Rosetta places all her trust in the famous author Mortenzi Gracia to help control Sihel's temper. Rosetta collapses onto the couch, feeling utterly exhausted from her endless efforts to tame the wolf. Fearing he might bite her hand, Rosetta keeps her distance and cautiously orders Shasha to sit. Ignoring her commands, the white wolf lets out a powerful roar, completely refusing to cooperate. Rosetta desperately yells at the stubborn wolf, pleading with him to finally sit down. Giving in to his aggression, Rosetta quickly offers the large bone treat to calm him down. Despite trying every method in the training books, Sahil refuses to calm down, exhausting Rosetta completely. Another exhausting week passes by as she struggles daily to manage the prince's wild curse. Despite all her training efforts, she lamentably realizes she is still subordinate to the proud wolf. Rosetta sternly warns Shasha that he will not get any outdoor walks if he behaves badly. Predictably, Sahil completely ignores her, prompting Rosetta to consider just keeping him locked up permanently. Rosetta lies limp on the couch, completely drained of energy from her failed training attempts. Rosetta covers her face in silent frustration, desperately searching for another way to resolve this. Her eyes suddenly snap open as she realizes she does not have to wait a full month. Rosetta bolts upright on the couch as a brilliant new plan suddenly forms in her mind. Walking away, she resolves to immediately start searching for the novel's original female lead. Marina enters with Shasha's raw meat lunch, stopping in surprise to ask Rosetta where she is going. Rosetta casually leaves to find the heroine, leaving a terrified Marina to feed the ferocious beast alone. Rosetta narrows her green eyes as she considers her next move carefully. Rosetta reminds herself that despite the wolf's troublesome nature, they must feed him well. A nervous Marina reluctantly agrees to feed the fierce beast. Rosetta wonders how to locate the novel's original female lead, Liliana, before her arrival in a month. The original female lead possessed incredible purification magic and traveled constantly to help people. Because of her wandering nature, she never remained in one location for long. Locating her is nearly impossible as she is exceptionally skilled at hiding and escaping. Rosetta sighs, realizing that tracking down the elusive heroine will be an uphill battle. Suddenly, terrified screams and shattering noises echo through the estate, startling Rosetta. Realizing what might have happened, Rosetta rushes toward the source of the chaos. Rosetta runs at full speed, panicking that Sahil might have escaped captivity. Inside, terrified servants scramble on the floor in absolute panic after the wolf escapes. A low, vicious growl rumbles from the wolf as he bares his razor-sharp fangs. Stepping outside, Rosetta scans the courtyard with a growing sense of dread. She stares in sheer shock, unable to believe what is happening before her. Standing proudly at the top of the stairs, the escaped wolf glares down at Rosetta. The beast locks his predatory golden eyes onto Rosetta, heightening the intense standoff. The wolf unleashes a terrifying growl, warning her not to take another step closer. Rosetta stands her ground, refusing to let the giant wolf intimidate her completely. The gargantuan shadow of the white wolf completely envelops Rosetta on the paved courtyard. Rosetta bitterly reflects that, despite her training efforts, the wolf still views her as prey. The estate guards tremble in absolute terror, utterly powerless to stop the raging beast. Lenoa and Marina rush down the grand stairs, shouting in panic to save their lady. Paralyzed by fear, Rosetta is unable to move as her brother desperately calls her name. The white wolf leaps forward through the air, launching a ferocious attack directly at Rosetta. Rosetta squeezes her ass shut, silently screaming for help as the beast closes in. Well, that's one way to dodge a dog bite. Rosetta instinctually delivers a devastating punch straight to the wolf's neck. The powerful impact completely dazes the giant wolf, leaving him staggering in total bewilderment. Rosetta stares blankly, completely shocked by the sheer force of her own physical reflexes. Lenoa and Marina watch in dead silence, absolutely speechless at Rosetta's monstrous strength. The massive wolf collapses completely unconscious onto the cobblestone floor, leaving everyone utterly stunned. The story pauses to introduce the secret hidden abilities belonging to the formidable Rosetta. Standing proudly, Rosetta reveals herself to be an extraordinarily skilled and lethal warrior. Rosetta possesses unmatched mastery over a wide array of weapons, including swords, bows, and firearms. Even wielding heavy maces, her innate combat genius makes her a legendary talent despite her troublesome personality. While the family elders heavily criticized her wild antics, they desperately coveted her immense combat talents. Utterly disinterested in family glory, Rosetta actively avoided their control to seek true entertainment instead. Constantly causing chaotic trouble, she completely exhausted the elders until they ultimately decided to abandon her. Her parents excuse her behavior as childish before leaving for the capital at the Emperor's command. Left entirely unsupervised in the north, Rosetta began wandering the region, creating her own unwritten story. The narrator admits she only discovered Rosetta's hidden monstrous strength after possessing her body. The dazed and weakened wolf struggles to maintain his balance, groggily swaying on his feet. Gasping for breath, Rosetta clutches her chest as the adrenaline from the intense confrontation fades. The wolf lets out one final weak growl, still refusing to back down quietly. Stealing her resolve, Rosetta takes a firm step forward to regain control of the situation. The wolf whips around rapidly, preparing for one last desperate attempt to escape her grasp. Grabbing the wolf's thick fur, Rosetta commands the struggling beast to stay absolutely still. Rosetta loudly orders Marina to bring the heavy muzzle, which the maid quickly delivers. Marina bravely steps forward and successfully fastens the heavy wire muzzle over the wolf's jaw. With the beast finally secured, Rosetta collapses onto the cobblestones, exhaling a sigh of utter relief. Rosetta falls back on the cobblestones in shock as the muzzled white wolf collapses nearby. Quick and decisive, Rosetta sweeps her blue-shod foot upward to deliver a sharp kick. The powerful kick launches the muzzled white wolf backward, his golden eyes widening in shock. Rosetta stands triumphantly over the completely dazed, defeated wolf lying on the stone courtyard. Seeing the weakened beast, Rosetta realizes he is far too exhausted to walk on his own. Determined, Rosetta shifts her position and prepares to carry the massive white wolf herself. Carrying the giant wolf on her shoulders, Rosetta walks past the utterly flabbergasted estate servants. Clapping his hands, the red-haired Lenoa praises Rosetta for her impressive work taming the beast. Rosetta angrily confronts Lenoa, who casually dismisses her hard-fought victory over the fierce monster. Rosetta's face twitches with annoyance as she glares at her brother's irritating attitude. Lenoa snidely tells Rosetta to manage her pet, while Rosetta furiously wishes she could kick him. Rosetta commands a dark-haired maid to immediately summon a doctor to the wolf's quarters. Carrying the heavy white wolf deeper into the estate, Rosetta sighs at his troublesome nature. Reaching the holding cell, a sharp metallic click echoes as Rosetta secures the lock. Inspecting the heavy chain lock, Rosetta deeply wonders how the wolf managed to escape alone. Rosetta kneels before the muzzled wolf, questioning him about the details of his unexpected escape. Rosetta gently smiles, relieved to see the white wolf's attitude starting to change. Shasha looks away guiltily, no longer viewing Rosetta with fierce hostility or predatory intent. Rosetta asks Shasha if he finally understands she is his master, prompting a low rumble. She recalls that the wolf's escape was caused by the servant responsible for his lunch. The servant had greedily coveted an expensive, glittering toy given to the beast. When the door was opened, the wolf fled, prompting an angry Lenoa to demand retribution. Rosetta suspects her fiercely protective brother might have quietly dealt with the thief behind her back. Extending her hand, Rosetta commands Shasha to give his paw, marking a week of training. Rosetta sits in a magnificent room, encouraging the stubborn wolf to cooperate with her command. Rewarding his obedience, Rosetta feeds the massive white wolf a large piece of fresh raw meat. Rosetta looks at him thoughtfully, realizing she must continue his daily routine. She notices that the well-fed wolf's hindquarters have grown remarkably round and chubby. Shifting her gaze to the warm sunset sky, Rosetta decides it is time for a walk. Pointing out his chubbiness, Rosetta teasingly warns Shasha he will turn into a fat pig. Highly offended, the white wolf lets out an angry bark, shocking Rosetta backward. Rosetta realizes with surprise that the proud beast actually understood her comment about his weight. As the wolf howls in deep despair, Rosetta sheepishly apologizes for pointing out his heavy eating. Looking at the grand estate exterior, Rosetta resolves to help the wolf lose some weight. Loud echoes of frustration ring out through the quiet, grand hallways of the estate. In a new green skirt, Rosetta struggles as the energetic wolf eagerly pulls her along. Reaching for the wall, Rosetta grabs the wire muzzle and leash to prepare for their outing. Rosetta insists that Shasha must wear the muzzle, but the wolf defiantly turns his head away. Rosetta coaxingly promises Shasha he will look handsome if he cooperates and wears the muzzle. Finally muzzled, the white wolf gently sniffs a pink wildflower on the grassy estate grounds. Watching the wolf leap gracefully, Rosetta is amazed to see him acting like a wild beast. She suddenly wonders why the muzzled wolf keeps glancing back to stare directly at her. Rosetta's eyes widen in realization as she remembers a specific detail from her training books. She recalls that dogs stare at their owners when relieving themselves because they feel vulnerable. Determined to be a good master, Rosetta sparkles and proudly promises to protect him. The embarrassed wolf quickly avoids her intense gaze, sweating nervously while trying to relieve himself. Rosetta sweat drops awkwardly, realizing that the proud prince feels deeply humiliated by her direct stare. Feeling flustered, Shasha suddenly bolts forward, pulling the leash right out of Rosetta's hand. Rosetta desperately reaches out and grips the slipping black leash, shouting for Shasha to stop. The powerful white wolf sprints across the green field, dragging a panicked Rosetta behind him. The muzzled white wolf lets out a loud, frustrated bark against the cleared blue sky. Rosetta wonders if the sight of a crow perched in the tree lured the wolf here. Rosetta gently pets the massive white wolf, trying to soothe his sudden agitation on their walk. Rosetta realizes the wolf won't listen to her and wonders what is causing his stubbornness. A close-up of the crow's dark, unsettling eye reveals its intense glare from the tree. Rosetta demands to know what the crow is looking at with such an intense glare. Rosetta angrily commands the crow to stop bothering them and fly away. Rosetta stands alone in the vast green field as the crow flies off into the sky. Rosetta desperately calls out to Shasha as the giant wolf suddenly bolts after the crow. A low, hostile growl rumbles from the muzzled white wolf as his golden eyes narrow. Rosetta gently pats the wolf's back to calm him down as they walk together. The peaceful afternoon sky is filled with soft white clouds, bringing a temporary calm. Time passes as the bright daytime sky gradually fades into warm sunset hues. Rosetta reflects that Shasha became incredibly agitated and barked wildly upon seeing the crow. Marina suggests that Shasha wanted to hunt the crow due to his predatory instincts in captivity. Rosetta considers her maid's theory but suspects the wolf's reaction stemmed from extreme anxiety instead. Rosetta narrows her eyes in deep thought, trying to unravel the mystery behind Shasha's behavior. A panicked maid urgently calls Rosetta to come check on Shasha as loud howling echoes. Rosetta stares in utter dismay at the broken debris scattered outside the wolf's quarters. Shasha peeks through the gold-paneled doors, looking incredibly guilty and pitifully sad. Rosetta stares at the dejected wolf, surprised by his suddenly vulnerable and pitiful behavior. Rosetta theorizes Shasha was bullied by crows as a pup, amazed he is showing vulnerability. Rosetta steps forward, softly whispering gentle reassurances to soothe the frightened and trembling beast. Rosetta coaxes Shasha out of his room, inviting the hesitant white wolf to approach her. Rosetta warmly extends her arms, coaxing her pet to come to her for a hug. The white wolf completely ignores Rosetta's open arms and dashes straight past her instead. Rosetta's eye twitches in sheer irritation at the wolf's blatant disrespect. Rosetta furiously shouts after the wolf, demanding to know where he is going. Rosetta is completely stunned to find Sasha sitting proudly right in her own bedroom. Rosetta finds the wolf's behavior cute, while Marina furiously curses the beast in disgust. Rosetta coaxes the massive white wolf to get onto the large ornate floor cushion. Rosetta bargains with Sasha, promising he can stay if he sleeps on his own cushion. Marina warns of a night attack, but Rosetta confidently boasts she will simply thrash him. Marina strictly insists that Sasha wear a muzzle since he is still a dangerous predator. Rosetta refuses to muzzle the wolf, prompting Marina to stay overnight for her protection. Lenoa asks Rosetta if the giant white wolf is always going to stay by her side. Rosetta claims Sasha only stays at night, but Lenoa demands why he is there so early. Lenoa mockingly asks what happened to the ruthless Rosetta who used to whip her beasts. Rosetta calmly states she is reforming her bad habits to become a better person. Lenoa chokes on his tea, suspiciously asking Rosetta if she is taking secret drugs. Offended, Rosetta stands up and orders Sasha to bite her rude brother immediately. Lenoa panics as the wolf growls, frantically pleading that his comment was just a joke. A sudden, polite knock sounds at the door, interrupting their chaotic breakfast argument. Sasha instantly halts his growling and turns his head toward the door, golden eyes alert. Lenoa calls out for the visitor to enter, pausing his frantic retreat from the wolf. Rosetta turns around in absolute surprise, instantly recognizing the person who just entered the room. Baron Palia, the manager of the fief, politely greets Rosetta upon entering the dining hall. Baron Palia looks noticeably tense and uncomfortable under the heavy gaze of the siblings. Behind his spectacles, his sharp purple eyes nervously glance sideways toward the giant white beast. Rosetta silently notes there is still another wolf in the estate she has not yet encountered. Sasha stands menacingly over Baron Palia, letting out a low, hostile growl. The estate servants watch the tense standoff with sheer terror and anxiety. Baron Palia nervously clears his throat, offering to discuss a matter regarding the mine. He places a large, glittering gemstone onto the dining table with a sharp tap. Rosetta's eyes widen with sudden shock as she catches sight of the brilliant stone. Baron Palia explains that the desired diamonds are gone, leaving only these waste stones. Looking at the bleak faces of the men, Rosetta notes the grim morning-like atmosphere. Rosetta bluntly calls the gemstone useless, prompting absolute disbelief from the two men. Examining the sparkling rock closely, Rosetta identifies it as a highly valuable manastone. Both Lenoa and Baron Palia gasp in utter shock, questioning her unexpected claim. Rosetta stares in disbelief, realizing they have no idea what a manastone is. She remembers from the original plot that the duchy was famous for these valuable stones. She notes that processed stones are recognizable, but this raw ore looks quite different. Rosetta fabricates a story about a wizard showing her a similar rare gemstone in her memory. Lenoa suddenly remembers a wizard Rosetta had previously sponsored, validating her claim. Rosetta confidently offers the gemstone to her companions, suggesting they verify its authenticity themselves. Baron Palia accepts the stone, praising her knowledge, while Rosetta senses his lingering disrespect. Baron Palia expresses relief that Rosetta is finally behaving sensibly after costing him so much. Rosetta's face twitches with growing annoyance as Baron Palia continues his tedious, relentless nagging. She glances sideways in sheer irritation, desperately wishing for any excuse to escape the conversation. Right on cue, the massive white wolf lets out a wide, tired yawn. Seizing the opportunity, Rosetta announces she must take Sasha out, walking away with the wolf. Baron Palia calls out to halt her departure, warning her about an important matter. Lenoa reveals that the crown prince has gone missing and a secret search is underway. Lenoa comments on the rumors regarding the missing royal, his golden eyes filled with curiosity. Rosetta recalls the dark plot where the crown prince as a wolf was relentlessly hunted. She remembers that the beast was captured and bound by a heavy chain collar. Baron Palia warns that Rosetta's upcoming coming-of-age ceremony might be held locally if the prince remains missing. He admits his surprise at Rosetta's exceptionally calm reaction to such disappointing news. Rosetta coolly reiterates she is a changed person before walking away with her massive pet. She imagines how the original short-tempered Rosetta would have flipped tables in blind rage. Entering her room, Rosetta quietly reflects that the upcoming ceremony means absolutely nothing to her. Walking down the quiet hallway, Rosetta realizes that the start of the novel's main story is fast approaching. She gently strokes the white wolf's head, softly reassuring him that he will return home soon. Sunlight streams through the grand high-arched windows, casting a warm glow across the estate hallway. Looking up at the clear sky, Rosetta mentally prepares herself for the challenges ahead. Later, Rosetta walks through the grassy field as Baron Palia persistently follows her with paperwork. Angrily recalls her brother Lenoa slyly dumping the mine's management duties onto her. Rosetta sighs in frustration, lamenting how her dream of a lazy life is slipping away. She pulls a red ball from a basket to play fetch with the energetic white wolf. Rosetta throws both a red and a blue ball high into the bright blue sky. A face full of flying sand and dirt leaves Baron Palia looking utterly miserable and annoyed. The blue ball flies over a tall stone wall, disappearing from the field. Sasha ignores the lost ball and proudly trots over to investigate the remaining red ball. Rosetta firmly orders Baron Palia to leave her alone, but he flatly refuses her request. Irritated, Rosetta turns around and demands to know why he won't go away. Baron Palia points out that she alone recognized the Mana Stone and found a processing firm. He insists that no one in the estate is better suited to run the mine than her. Rosetta claims ignorance of business, secretly regretting that she accidentally dug her own grave with her knowledge. Baron Palia reassures her that she only needs to offer her opinions while he handles the rest. White paws dash across the lush green grass, kicking up dirt as Sasha runs ahead. Rosetta pauses in the field, suddenly realizing that her white wolf is no longer following her. Rosetta's green eyes widen in sudden realization as a chilling thought strikes her. A sudden whoosh sounds as the massive white wolf leaps cleanly over the tall stone wall. Rosetta's face pales in utter shock as she realizes her pet might be running away. She desperately reminds herself that the beast's escape now would ruin all her future plans. Rosetta frantically screams for Sasha to return as her heart pounds with terror. A looming sense of disaster washes over her at the thought of losing him. Baron Palia is knocked to the ground as Rosetta commands him to get out of her way. Rosetta sprints across the grass, filled with regret for letting her guard down. Rosetta screams at the high stone wall, desperately begging Sasha not to abandon her. Horrific visions of Sasha being struck by a carriage fill Rosetta's mind. She imagines the helpless white wolf being captured and abused by cruel street catchers. Oppressive anxiety grips Rosetta as she clutches her chest in absolute dread. With a sudden leap, Sasha bounced back over the wall, carrying the lost blue ball. The giant white wolf dashes back toward her, his golden eyes filled with pride. Sasha drops the glittering blue toy at Rosetta's feet with a soft, proud tap. Relief washes over Rosetta as she asks if he only left to retrieve the ball. She reflects on her foolishness for assuming the wolf had run away in hatred. Sasha affectionately rubs his head against Rosetta's hand, seeking her comfort. Rosetta gently cradles his giant head, praising him for bringing the ball back. In her heart, a deep, silent bond begins to form between them for the first time. Rosetta beams with joy, showering her adorable pet with sweet compliments. Sasha responds with a happy bark, jumping up playfully to greet his owner. Bright laughter echoes as the massive wolf playfully rolls around with Rosetta in the grass. Baron Palia stands frozen in utter bewilderment, calling out to Rosetta in surprise. Still lying on the grass, Rosetta looks up, startled to find the Baron still there. Baron Palia clears his throat, holding up paperwork to discuss a pressing matter. Rosetta sighs internally, highly annoyed by the Baron's relentless persistence. She hums thoughtfully, looking over the documents as Baron Palia explains the situation. The Baron plans to use beautiful, alluring jewelry to attract clients to their mine. He explains that processing delicate mana stones requires highly skilled and expensive craftsmen. Rosetta instantly envisions piles of gold coins, determined to maximize profits for her retirement. When Baron Palia asks if they have any alternative, Rosetta suggests another option. She resolves to find a cheaper alternative to protect her precious retirement fund. Rosetta whispers a legendary name under her breath, remembering a master jeweler. Rosetta instructs Baron Palia to contact a skilled but obscure artisan named Asilla. She recalls Countess Giller wearing an exquisite, unforgettable necklace to a grand birthday banquet. Baron Palia looks completely stunned, immediately recognizing the famous masterpiece. The legendary crimson necklace was a beautifully subtle magic tool usable by non-magicians. Baron Palia inquires how Rosetta could possibly know of such an anonymous jeweler. Rosetta stands proudly, reflecting on the original novel's Rosetta being obsessed with beautiful things. She remembers how the original Villainess relentlessly drove her servants to find the necklace creator. Baron Palia smiles in relief, realizing they can keep the cost reasonable. He hesitates, warning her that Asilla avoids attention and previously rejected his contract offers. He notes that the skilled female artisan would have faced a grim fate without her talent. Filled with sudden determination, Baron Palia vows to personally secure the contract. Rosetta happily waves him off, encouraging him to leave immediately. She smiles sweetly at his farewell, secretly hoping this is their final meeting. A sudden sharp step halts him on the grass, signaling a sudden interruption. Baron Palia watches Rosetta affectionately stroke the white wolf's head, deep in thought. Baron Palia recalls how Rosetta called out for her pet, deeply analyzing her voice. He remembers her panicked shout as she frantically searched for the giant white wolf. He reflects on past conversations, describing Rosetta as a young girl who simply needed time. A red-haired nobleman confidently reassures him that the young woman will eventually mature. Strolling outdoors, Baron Palia realizes he had completely misjudged Rosetta as a foolish girl. He smiles, contemplating that teaching her business management might actually be a wise decision. Rosetta lies exhausted on her bed, fully drained by Baron Polya's relentless daily nagging. Well, nothing says good morning quite like endless mind management paperwork. Rosetta blocks her ears in sheer frustration, exasperated by the Baron's daily, persistent visits. Soft rustle sounds as Sasha gently nudges Rosetta's bare foot to draw her attention. Sitting up on her bed, Rosetta warmly thanks the massive white wolf for comforting her. The proud white wolf lets out a happy, resounding bark in response to her praise. Rosetta sighs, sweating as she wonders if her pet is actually looking at her with pity. Snuggling into her pillows, Rosetta bids Sasha a peaceful goodnight as she drifts to sleep. Quiet stillness settles over the dark bedroom hallway as the moonlit night deepens. Fierce, rumbling growls suddenly echoes through the bedroom as the white wolf senses danger. Still half asleep, Rosetta mutters a soft hush, groggily asking the giant beast to be quiet. Her eyes instantly snap open, glowing a sharp green as a sudden realization strikes her. Rosetta bolts upright in shock, realizing that deadly assassins have successfully breached her room. A sudden whoosh sounds as a cloaked assassin lunges from the shadows with a blade. With sharp reflexes, Rosetta narrowly evades the lethal strike under the cover of darkness. Letting out a painful scream, the intruder is savagely bitten as Sasha leaps to protect her. Sitting on the bed, Rosetta quickly apologizes to the wolf for ignoring his warning. With sudden determination, Rosetta reaches for the shining sword resting on her nightstand drawer. Rosetta unleashes a swift, lethal slash, instantly neutralizing the assassin with her blade. A sickening splash sounds as dark blood splatters violently across the shadowed chamber. The defeated assassins lie motionless on the floor in growing pools of crimson blood. Facing the remaining foes, Rosetta notes that 5 more masked assassins are still standing. Blood splattered across her cheek, Rosetta fiercely demands to know who sent them. The masked assassins visibly flinch, completely intimidated by the young woman's terrifying aura. Rosetta's glowing green eye narrows as she warns them that their silence seals their fate. The chilling darkness descends as she resolutely decides to eliminate every last one of them. A weary, soft sigh escapes her lips as blood drips steadily from her sharp blade. Rosetta calmly wipes the blood from her cheek, highly annoyed that her sleep was interrupted. A low, menacing growl draws her attention back to Sasha, who watches the balcony. Stepping near the open door, Rosetta is startled to spot the giant black crow again. Staring at the sinister bird, she suddenly realizes it is the Empress's magical spy bird. Rosetta finally understands that the wolf's previous anger was because he recognized the spy. Sweat drops from her brow as she realizes the spy crow has been tracking them. With a sharp clatter, Rosetta drops her heavy sword to pursue the escaping bird. Leaning over the balcony, Rosetta aims a rifle and fires a shot at the crow. A sharp whoosh sounds as the black crow narrowly evades the bullet, escaping. Rosetta lowers her smoking weapon, staring into the dark night with bitter frustration. She bitterly blames herself for forgetting the original plot where the Empress used birds. A heavy thud echoes as Sasha suddenly collapses weakly onto the carpeted floor. Filled with terror, Rosetta rushes forward and tightly throws her arms around his neck. She gasps in absolute horror, noticing her palm is covered in warm, sticky blood. Rosetta stands in her chamber, panicking frantically as she realizes her pet is badly injured. Rosetta quickly uses a red blanket to firmly apply pressure to the wolf's bleeding wound. Tears welling in her eyes, she asks Sasha if he got hurt while protecting her. Rosetta regrets getting in the wolf's way, realizing he could have easily defeated the attackers alone. Rosetta blames herself for losing focus during the battle, which directly led to his injury. Overcome with guilt, Rosetta declares to her pet that she is unqualified to be his owner. A sudden wet lick from Sasha startles Rosetta, brushing painfully against her own facial injury. Rosetta realizes she is injured too and notes with surprise that this is Sasha's first face lick. Embracing the giant white wolf, Rosetta reassures him and promises to protect him from now on. Rosetta is bewildered as Sasha nervously retreats, wondering why he always backs away from her. Rosetta asks Sasha if his fear is related to the Empress, firmly reiterating her vow to keep him safe. Sasha's jaw drops as he speaks, demanding to know how she realized the Empress ordered the assassination. Rosetta freezes in complete breathless shock at the sudden and impossible sound of her wolf speaking. Panicking wildly, Rosetta screams and flings the giant white wolf away from her in absolute terror. Rosetta stammers in utter disbelief that her pet can talk, but the wolf flatly corrects her by stating he is a wolf, not a dog. Sweat dripping down her face, Rosetta mentally breaks down, convinced that this situation is completely insane. Rosetta frantically recalls the original novel, remembering that the cursed prince lost all human consciousness as a wolf and never spoke. Rosetta mutters in disbelief, holding her face as she concludes that the entire world has truly gone mad. Rosetta laments her decision to raise the dangerous prince, entirely dumbfounded that he is now capable of human speech. The wolf's piercing yellow eye glints in the dark as he sternly demands an answer from her. A heavy thud echoes as Sasha places his massive paw on Rosetta's shoulder, pinning her with his intense gaze. Hovering menacingly above her, Sasha pins Rosetta to the floor, aggressively demanding that she explain how she knows his secret. A loud smack sounds as Rosetta suddenly punches the talking wolf straight in his snout. Sasha lets out a pained whimper as Rosetta frantically apologizes, explaining that he simply surprised her. Rosetta dramatically demeans herself as a terrible owner, while the grumbling wolf tells her to stop treating him like a dog. Rosetta suddenly remembers he is actually a human prince and asks him how it is possible for him to speak. Ignoring her question, the wolf demands for the fourth time to know how she figured out the Empress sent the assassins. Pointing to her dropped rifle, Rosetta quickly lies that she simply heard rumors of the Empress commanding birds. She explains that she noticed the suspicious crow tailing them earlier but dismissed her initial doubts until tonight. Rosetta asks if he was the Empress's dog, but the wolf angrily demands she stop saying nonsense. Rosetta is fascinated by his expressive growling, noting that his furious expression makes him look remarkably human. Rosetta resolves to play dumb, deciding she will pretend not to know his true identity until he chooses to reveal it himself. The quiet room is suddenly pierced as the white wolf calls out Rosetta's full name with serious gravity. Rosetta gasps in genuine surprise, startled by the sudden formality and weight of his voice. Standing across the balcony, Rosetta asks if he knows her, and the wolf calmly confirms that he does. He explains that she is widely known as the family's mad dog, realizing he has ended up inside the Castle Duchy. Calling himself fortunate, Sasha tells Rosetta that there is something important he must share with her. He reveals his true identity as Crown Prince Saihal, explaining that he was transformed into a beast by a curse. Rosetta stands frozen in stunned silence as the wolf confidently waits for her reaction to his massive confession. Rosetta smiles nervously, screaming internally about why he would reveal such a critical royal secret to her. She panics, realizing that such highly sensitive information should never be shared with anyone. Rosetta frantically asks why he told her his secret, while the embarrassed wolf mutters that using honorifics feels awkward. Sahiel explains he had no choice but to rely on her, while Rosetta claims her calm reaction is normal. Rosetta sweat drops and smiles, admitting that his familiar voice makes his identity highly believable. Sahiel compliments her kindness despite her scary reputation and asks how he ended up in the duchy. Rosetta freezes in sudden panic, terrified of what will happen if he discovers how he actually arrived. Sahiel tilts his head, innocently asking if there is a problem with how he got here. Rosetta puts her hands together with a sweet smile, desperately trying to hide her sheer terror. She remembers capturing him like an unconscious wild beast with her servants looking on in absolute horror. Rosetta recalls chaining the muzzled wolf up, ignoring his furious growls as she forcefully claimed to be his lady. Smiling strainedly, she prepares to lie to avoid execution for disrespecting the imperial court. She explains that her brother brought him to the duchy to safely recover from his severe injuries. Rosetta congratulates herself on the perfect lie, glad she did not mention her brother was actually hunting him. The giant white wolf suspiciously asks about her brother Renoa, wondering if she's raising him to eat him. Rosetta reacts with dramatic offense, asking how he could possibly accuse her of such dark motives. Clasping her chest, Rosetta looks utterly outraged and deeply hurt by his ridiculous accusations. She indignantly lists all her affectionate care, from providing luxury pillows to taking him on daily walks. She points out how exhausting it was to care for him despite his extremely difficult personality. Rosetta angrily demands if His Highness understands her devotion, completely ignoring his happily wagging tail. Sahiel silently enjoys her rant, amused that her terrifying reputation contradicts her sweet actions. Rosetta fumes in silent rage, realizing her formerly cute pet is now openly mocking her. Rosetta sternly threatens to kick him out, instantly causing the proud prince to beg for mercy. Rosetta's green eyes widen in sudden alarm as a maid's voice calls out from the hallway. Quick as a flash, Rosetta clamps her hand over the giant wolf's snout to silence him. Whispering urgently, Rosetta warns the prince to remain quiet because her servants have arrived. The silver-haired headmaid bursts through the door, flanked by armed palace guards. Rosetta calmly welcomes them, gesturing to the dead assassins scattered across the bloody floor. She politely requests her startled staff to clean up the gruesome mess in her chamber. Rosetta assures the worried maid she is fine, but instructs her to summon a doctor for her injured wolf. The maid gasps upon spotting the wound on Rosetta's cheek, insisting on treating it immediately. Rosetta dismisses her concern, urging her not to make a fuss about a minor scratch. The maid insists on treating her, while a muffled chuckling sound escapes from the amused wolf. One of the guards turns in confusion, swearing he heard a strange laughing sound. Rosetta covers her flushed face in sheer embarrassment, knowing Sahiel is mocking how babied she is. Rosetta quickly announces she wants a bath, and the maid rushes to prepare it. The scene shifts outside to the grand estate as Rosetta's heavy thoughts begin to drift. She reflects on the exhausting events of dealing with the Baron and the Talking Prince. Overwhelmed by sheer physical and mental fatigue, Rosetta feels completely drained. Sahiel gazes at her with his intense yellow eyes, quietly asking if he can inquire further. Freshly showered, Rosetta sits on her bed as the prince continues his relentless questioning. Though she answered his initial questions, Rosetta's immense sleep deprivation quickly catches up to her. As the prince hops onto her bed, Rosetta tiredly addresses him, prompting him to ask what is wrong. Delirious with exhaustion, Rosetta aggressively declares that the prince is now her personal dog. She slurs that her month of dedicated care makes her fully qualified to own him. Boldly claiming her status as his mistress, Rosetta weakly issues her final command. A soft thump sounds as Rosetta completely collapses face down onto her bed, thoroughly defeated. She groggily mumbles for him to save the rest of his questions for tomorrow. Peaceful silence fills the moonlit room as Rosetta finally drifts into a deep, uninterrupted sleep. Sihale stares at the sleeping woman, realizing she is nothing like the terrifying rumors. He recalls the horrific military rumors of her bloodthirsty, unforgiving nature and violent temper. Though her brother Leonard's reactions suggested some truth, Sihale suspects the rumors were heavily exaggerated. Sihale realizes she is actually far from the evil monster depicted in gossip. He warmly remembers her gentle, reassuring vow to protect him from his enemies. He recalls the soothing quality of her voice and the surprising warmth of her embrace. He ponders if her month of care has forged a genuine bond between them. He is deeply amused by her fierce, sleepy declaration of ownership over him. A soft, genuine smile spreads across the wolf's face as he finds her highly intriguing. Sihale quietly keeps watch over Rosetta, letting her sleep in peace. The wolf huffs and turns his head away, struggling with a stubborn thought. Sihale proudly decides that a crown prince belongs on a luxurious bed, not the floor. Rosetta's green eyes flutter open the next morning to a bizarre and heavy sensation. She finds herself staring directly into the intense yellow eyes of the giant wolf. Rosetta gasps in sheer shock as the massive white wolf completely towers over her bed. Rosetta tries to ignore the giant wolf standing on her bed, but Sihale demands she wake up and answer him. Rosetta screams in surprise as her eyes adjust to the morning light illuminating her bedside clock. Still lying down, Rosetta sweat drops in absolute confusion, claiming she doesn't understand what he means. She mentally panics, struggling to distinguish between the wolf Shasha and his true human identity as Sihale. The white wolf suddenly yawns wide, exposing his sharp fangs right above her face. He leans his massive jaws directly over her face, leaving her completely defenseless. Rosetta gasps in shock as a small drop of blood begins to trickle down her bottom lip. With a gentle swipe of his tongue, the wolf licks the blood from her bitten lip. Rosetta's eyes widen as she freezes in pure disbelief at his bizarre action. Her mind races in absolute panic, wondering if the prince has completely lost his sanity. Staring blankly at him, she remains frozen as she tries to process what just happened. She continues to spiral internally, convinced that the prince is acting entirely out of his mind. Finally snapping out of her shock, Rosetta sits up and frantically pushes him away. The wolf lets out an amused chuckle, pleased that his strategy successfully restored his voice. Outraged, Rosetta repeatedly hits him on the head, demanding to know why he bit her lips. While the grumbling wolf complains about her violence, Rosetta cross-examines him for his unacceptable behavior. Sitting calmly on the bed, the giant wolf casually excuses his actions by claiming he was hungry. Rosetta glares at him with deep suspicion, forcing the defensive prince to deny any malicious intent. He explains he couldn't speak upon waking and found her lips appealing, prompting her to ask if she is prey. Rosetta hesitates as she remembers her social standing is far below that of the crown prince. She quickly discards any royal etiquette, deciding she would much rather just give him a good thrashing. When the prince claims her blood is the trigger to restore his speech, she remains highly skeptical. Touching her lip, Rosetta listens as he points out his voice returned both yesterday and today only after tasting her blood. She remembers that he did indeed first speak yesterday right after licking the blood off her cheek. Rosetta wonders if she possesses a rare purification ability similar to the novel's original heroine. She quickly dismisses the theory, reasoning that he would have fully returned to his human form by now. Her deep contemplation is suddenly interrupted as the white wolf calls out to her. Sihale leans in close once more, boldly asking if he can bite her lips again. Blushing furiously, Rosetta retreats to the corner of the bed and strictly reminds him that he is still a man. Although she tries to rationalize that he is currently just a dog, she is troubled by how fast her heart is beating. She firmly tells him to bite her finger instead of her lips the next time he needs blood. The wolf droops his ears in dejection, leaving Rosetta feeling guilty due to his incredibly cute, sad expression. Calling herself a fool, Rosetta sweat drops as she asks if he needs more, which the prince eagerly confirms. The scene shifts as Rosetta reaches for a sleek silver dagger on a writing desk. Rosetta calmly cuts her finger, allowing drops of fresh blood to pool on the tip. Extending her hand, Rosetta tells the white wolf to lick the blood from her finger. She flushes slightly, feeling a strange, ticklish sensation as the prince licks her hand with great relish. Placing the dagger down, Rosetta asks about his future plans, and Sihale reveals he wants to contact Leonard. Rosetta envisions her handsome brother Leonard, who is bound to her by strong familial ties. She questions how he plans to contact her brother in his current form, causing the wolf to fall silent. Rosetta reacts with annoyance when he expects her to deliver the message, though he promises a reward later. Eagerly imagining a future of pampering him with cute wolf ears, Rosetta's anger immediately melts away. Ready to assist, Rosetta tells them they should write the letter to her brother right away. A blank sheet of parchment floats into view, prepared for the secret correspondence. Rosetta begins writing the letter, carefully signing his name, Sahale Van Idris, at the bottom. Pausing at her desk, Rosetta taps her pen against her chin, wondering if she missed any details. Rosetta stands up to review the document as the large wolf watches her closely from behind. She suddenly turns around and grabs the wolf's front paw, catching him completely off guard. Rosetta explains with a mischievous smile that they must leave his unique mark to verify the letter's authenticity. The final document rests on the desk, officially stamped with a giant gray wolf paw print. Rosetta asks if the stamped document is okay, and the white wolf approves of her work. Rosetta declares they are now partners and asks the prince to call her by her name. She firmly grasps the giant wolf's paw to seal their new partnership. A mental resolution highlights her hope to build a stronger friendship through their mutual connection. Rosetta hands the sealed letter to her butler, ordering him to deliver it urgently to her brother. Seeing the butler hesitate, Rosetta asks what is wrong, prompting him to voice concern over her injury. Rosetta's sweat drops as she finally realizes the constant screaming outside is her angry brother's doing. Butler advises her to take a new herbal tonic, and she surprisingly complies, easing his worries. The butler is deeply moved by her cooperation, tearfully promising to prepare the tonic every day. Walking along the terrace, Rosetta grumbles about why Lenoa has not come to see her. The view pans out to the stone courtyard where the sounds of training echo. Several exhausted knights lie collapsed on the courtyard floor, completely drained from their intense training. Rosetta approaches Lenoa, who is sitting on a wooden crate with his sword nearby. Rosetta taps her brother on the shoulder, calling him out for not visiting her. Lenoa turns his head slightly, his sharp yellow eyes narrowing as he looks at her. Lenoa bluntly tells Rosetta she looks like a mess, but she quickly insists she is fine. Lenoa clicks his tongue in irritation, clearly unsatisfied with her dismissive response. Lenoa furiously screams at the resting knights to get back to training, startling them. Rosetta asks Lenoa why he is putting the knights through such brutal training. Lenoa explains the knights deserve it for sleeping during an infiltration, calling their laziness embarrassing. Lenoa changes the subject, asking if her pet wolf, Shasha, was seriously injured. Lenoa begrudgingly admits the wolf did a good job protecting her and is useful. Lenoa firmly declares that Rosetta is no longer allowed to walk around without a bodyguard. Rosetta's sweat drops in sheer disbelief, frantically asking why she suddenly needs a bodyguard. Lenoa leans in close, asking in a low tone if she truly does not understand why. Lenoa angrily demands to know who dared to bite her swollen and torn lips. Rosetta frantically explains she was just playing with her wolf, making Lenoa question her strength. Lenoa chides Rosetta in a comical lecture, saying she has grown weak to be bitten by a dog. Overwhelmed by his continuous nagging, Rosetta covers her ears and loudly begs him to stop. Accepting defeat, Rosetta returns to her bedroom, accompanied by her newly assigned bodyguard. Rosetta glances back with a sigh, clearly annoyed by her shadow. Rosetta worries that the guard's constant presence will prevent her from speaking with Sahale. Rosetta tells her bodyguard to go rest, but he politely declines due to his duty. Pointing out his trembling legs, Rosetta commands him to rest in the adjacent room. The exhausted guard stands at the doorway, visibly hesitating and trembling. Rosetta barks a fierce order for him to leave, terrifying the guard into instant obedience. Rosetta sighs in relief, noting the stubborn guard should have just listened to her sooner. A clean, decisive click sounds as Rosetta shuts her heavy bedroom door to ensure privacy. Rosetta walks back into her room, questioning the silent gaze of the giant wolf on her bed. Sihale silently observes her, realizing the terrifying rumors about her cruel nature were completely false. Rosetta checks on his bandages while Sihale questions why she does not let servants handle it. Rosetta holds up the medical supplies, reminding him that he was far too ferocious for anyone else. Rosetta sits on the bed, explaining she had to handle all his care because of his hostility. When Sihale assumes he only trusted her, Rosetta jokingly reveals she had to overpower him first. A warm, serene smile graces Rosetta's face, casting a remarkably soft and beautiful light around her. Sahale looks at her, touched by the realization of how deeply she cared for his wolf form. Rosetta jokingly reminds him that she protected his life because their survival is linked together. Rosetta gently strokes the thick, soft white fur of the quiet wolf's neck. Rosetta's eyes widen in sudden astonishment as her hand pauses on his fur. Rosetta gasps in absolute delight, announcing that the prince's severe wound has completely healed. Rosetta asks if the wolf has special powers, to which he replies that he possesses no such convenient abilities. Rosetta wonders about the true nature of his healing as the wolf licks her finger to taste her blood. As Rosetta stares at him, the prince simply questions why she finds his healing reaction so surprising. Rosetta internally grumbles about the narrative unfairness of the story's main villain possessing such an incredible power. Rosetta asks if her blood heals humans too, but Sihale points out her own scars, confirming it only works on him. Gazing at the giant wolf, Rosetta admits she cannot shake the persistent feeling of being deeply connected to Sihale. Overwhelmed by her racing thoughts and the complicated situation, Rosetta lets out a heavy, weary sigh. Sihale gently asks if her finger hurts, prompting Rosetta to tease him about suddenly caring for her well-being. Rosetta confidently assures him she is fine, proudly claiming a true Quetzal wouldn't be bothered by such minor pain. Giant white wolf flinches in sudden shock as Rosetta unexpectedly reaches out to pet his head. Confused by his defensive reaction, Rosetta blinks as the startled wolf quickly pulls his head away. Rosetta asks if she should stop, but Sihale admits he doesn't mind, while questioning why she is stroking him. Rosetta warmly tells him it is because he is cute, wondering if she even needs a reason. The giant white wolf turns his head away, looking thoroughly flustered and confused by her affectionate compliment. Under the quiet, starry sky of the grand estate, Sihale silently ponders if he is truly cute. Rosetta rests her cheek on her hand, deeply troubled that Sihale has mistaken her for a kind-hearted person. The blue-haired Baron Palia yells in an absolute rage, demanding to know who dared to attack her. While the angry Baron vows to eliminate her enemies, Rosetta realizes his concern is because they recently became close. Rosetta reminds the Baron that he cannot fight, but he defensively declares he will just hire assassins. Rosetta realizes the weak Baron's constant worrying has mistakenly convinced Sihale that her bad reputation is just a rumor. Sitting on her chair, Rosetta notes that Sihale's misunderstanding about her villainous nature has only grown deeper. The bright afternoon sun shines through the trees as a guard off-screen praises their delicious lunch. Her silver-haired guard Alan eagerly runs up to offer his company on her afternoon walk. Holding her parasol, Rosetta politely declines Alan's offer, choosing to walk only with her white wolf today. Rosetta points towards a nearby group of trees, instructing Alan to wait for them in the shade. Alan swoons at her apparent thoughtfulness, prompting an annoyed Rosetta to sharply tell him to go away. As Alan cheerfully waves goodbye, Rosetta wonders how such a simple-minded guard managed to become a Quetzal Knight. Sihale suggests she tame the guard, but Rosetta boasts she has already successfully tamed a much more aggressive beast. Sihale warily asks if she is referring to him, to which Rosetta playfully mock-scolds him for assuming so. Smiling softly, Rosetta gently pats the giant white wolf's head as they continue their peaceful walk. Rosetta mentions her brother Leonard is arriving today, silently calculating that the wolf hasn't bathed in 3 weeks. Rosetta casually asks the giant white wolf if he would like to shower before her brother's arrival. The scene shifts to a grand marble bathhouse as the white wolf realizes her terrifying reputation might be true. Splash! The wolf splashes in the bath, internally lamenting her aggressive behavior after thinking she was kind. Rosetta enters the bath, ordering him to stop complaining since his white fur is incredibly dirty. Rosetta defends herself by yelling that she only touched him by accident while scrubbing his fur. Rosetta glares at him with competitive annoyance, silently asking if this is how he wants to play. Rosetta mockingly asks the prince if he has ever even dated anyone, teasing his sudden loss of innocence. Rosetta continues to provoke him, questioning if his legendary battlefield power and reputation are also completely fake. The white wolf gasps in absolute shock and disbelief at her incredibly bold and teasing remarks. The flustered wolf details that topics like mating are completely inappropriate to discuss so casually. Rosetta cheekily offers to find him a good female partner if he is so eager to mate. As the annoyed wolf calls her shameless, chibi Rosetta giggles and relentlessly teases him for being shy. Rosetta pours a bucket of water over his head, leaving the wolf to wonder if she plans to drown him. Having finished scrubbing his fur, a clean Rosetta announces they're finally done. The wolf shakes his wet fur vigorously, soaking a screaming Rosetta in a massive spray of water. Drenched and utterly defeated, Rosetta drapes a dry towel over her head and sighs in resignation. Rosetta kneels on the floor, quietly drying the wolf's damp fur with a towel. The wolf suddenly tilts his head straight up, prompting Rosetta to ask what he is looking at. The wooden bathroom door swings wide open as Rosetta suggests it is finally time to head outside. Shivering in her damp white robe, the red-haired Rosetta complains about the cold bathroom air. Rosetta's bright teal eyes widen in sudden surprise as she notices someone has entered. Rosetta gasps in recognition upon seeing her older brother Leonard standing in the bathhouse. The white wolf silently observes Leonard, noting that Rosetta resembles him far more than Lenoa. Lenoa enters the room with a wide yawn, looking completely exhausted from his duties. Lenoa's eyes suddenly drop down as he catches sight of his sister's state, leaving her bewildered. Lenoa frantically covers his eyes, scolding Rosetta to go change because her wet clothes are translucent. While Lenoa complains to Leonard about being hit, Rosetta realizes why the wolf was staring upward earlier. Rosetta angrily accuses the white wolf of peeping, but he flatly denies it, mentally questioning her own modesty. Lenoa freezes in absolute shock, his eyes wide as he processes what he just heard. Lenoa asks in disbelief if the beast just spoke, while the wolf smugly notes his predictable reaction. Recognizing the voice, Lenoa is stunned, while the wolf casually mocks him for still acting like a brat. Lenoa stands completely dumbfounded, unable to comprehend that the crown prince is standing before him. Realization finally sets in, prompting Lenoa to scream in absolute terror and disbelief. Lenoa frantically rushes over to the bed to grab something to cover his sister. A hand swiftly pulls a heavy red blanket off the bed to shield Rosetta. Lenoa aggressively wraps Rosetta in the blanket, angrily warning the wolf to avert his eyes. Lenoa chides his sister about the untrustworthy nature of wolves, while Rosetta snaps back in her defense. Leonard steps in to break up the sibling dispute, commanding Rosetta to change and Lenoa to stop yelling. Rosetta sweetly asks Leonard to dry the wolf's fur so the prince doesn't catch a cold. The cold wolf eagerly agrees, and Leonard politely accepts the duty of drying the imperial beast. Lenora doubts Leonard's grooming skills before loudly demanding Rosetta wear a black outfit downstairs. Now dressed in a black top and elegant purple skirt, Rosetta knocks on the parlor door. Lenoa opens the door looking utterly drained, causing a startled Rosetta to ask what happened. Rosetta wonders if her brother's exhausted state is due to discussing the hunting incident with the prince. Lenoa warns Rosetta not to bring up the hunting incident as the prince has no memory of it. Lenoa sighs in relief, terrified of the severe consequences should the prince ever discover who shot him. Leonard wipes his brow, admitting he did not realize drying the wolf's fur would be so exhausting. Rosetta approaches the pristine and fluffy white wolf, addressing him with proper royal respect. When Rosetta asks if Leonard was gentle, the prince flatly complains about the terrible grooming experience. Rosetta giggles at the complaint while Leonard coughs politely, prompting her to call everyone to sit down. The group gathers in the luxurious parlor, preparing to discuss the delicate situation regarding the prince. Lenora glares in disbelief at how casually his sister treats the legendary crown prince in wolf form. The wolf explains he trusted Lenoa with his identity because of his absolute loyalty to the Cazelle family. Leonard nudges the smug Lenoa, firmly steering the conversation back to the serious events at hand. The screen darkens as Sahel begins explaining all the events that occurred so far. He details how consuming Rosetta's blood somehow granted him the ability to speak. Leonard notes with grave intensity that Rosetta's blood miraculously healed the prince's severe wounds. Leonard and Lenoa turn their silent, intense glares directly toward a nervous Rosetta. Rosetta defensively begs them to stop staring, insisting she has no explanation for her blood's powers. Intrigued, the two brothers simultaneously express their curiosity to see if her blood heals humans too. A devious smile graces Rosetta's face as she suggests testing the theory on one of them. Lenoa vehemently refuses, expressing deep disgust at the idea of drinking his sister's blood. Rosetta menacingly advances on Lenoa to force the test, prompting him to scream in terror. Meanwhile, the level-headed Leonard calmly draws a small silver dagger to make a quick cut. Rosetta sweat drops as Leonard slices his hand, dryly noting he didn't need to cut himself so deeply. Rosetta scolds her brothers to be gentle with the bloodletting while Lenoa snaps back in irritation. Leonard holds his hand over an empty glass, letting his blood drip steadily inside. Leonard stares downward with deep, unblinking focus as the experiment finally begins. He raises the glass of fresh blood, ready to put Rosetta's mysterious healing powers to the test. The red-haired man elegantly sips from his glass of red wine in the parlor. A heavy, awkward silence fills the lavishly decorated parlor as the three siblings sit together. Leonard notes that her blood has no healing effect on humans while Lenoa watches him. Lenoa hysterically questions why Rosetta is feeding her blood to the wolf, but she casually brushes it off. Leonard announces that Nanabi will arrive shortly to attempt to purify the Empress's curse on the prince. A light brown-haired woman turns her head, her soft hair swaying elegantly as she enters. The red-eyed woman smiles politely with her hands clasped, greeting the siblings in the room. Narration introduces Nanabi Terran as the prince's trusted wizard, who silently begins analyzing the curse with magic. Nanabi explains the curse is too complex to break, confirming Rosetta's thoughts that only the novel's female lead can solve it. Nanabi asks to keep Rosetta's spilled blood, and Rosetta readily agrees since she has no use for it. Lenoa asks if removing the Empress's special poison would completely lift the curse from the prince. The prince explains that removing the poison only returns him to human form temporarily, except during full moons. Rosetta quietly listens to the explanation, deep in thought about the prince's curse. A vision of a beautiful blonde woman with bright blue eyes appears amidst pink flower petals. A narrative caption reveals that the prince's ultimate fate is to meet his destined lover, Liliana. A rhythmic talk-talk sounds as Rosetta taps her fingers, proposing they find a purification wizard, which surprises Lenoa. Rosetta suggests searching for the wandering wizard Liliana Maniu, silently noting how the original story has collapsed. Lenoa enthusiastically tells Leonard to trust Rosetta's judgment, assuring him that positive unexpected outcomes will follow. White Wolf agrees to begin the search and decides to stay at the estate in the meantime. Lenoa argues with Leonard, insisting that the duchy is the safest place because of how they handled the assassins. Lenoa boasts about Rosetta's incredible combat skills while Leonard departs, politely asking the prince to protect her. Rosetta confidently declares she can protect herself, and her departing brother simply agrees with her statement. A hand gently reaches out to pat someone on the head in a comforting gesture. Rosetta's teal eyes widen in surprise as Leonard affectionately pats her head before leaving. Rosetta stares blankly, deeply touched and bewildered by her brother's rare display of affection. The White Wolf curiously asks what is wrong as Rosetta sits frozen, touching her own head. Leaning closer, the White Wolf notes that she has been touching her hair for quite some time. Rosetta sharply pushes the wolf away, prompting him to complain about her sudden aggressive reaction. Rosetta listens silently as the prince admits it has been a long time since anyone patted his head. Rosetta recalls her sibling relationship with Lenoa, noting they never engaged in such affectionate gestures. She explains that her parents were always distant, and others feared her due to her high status. A lonely silhouette of a young girl stands isolated in a vast, dark void of solitude. The White Wolf looks at Rosetta with a soft, empathetic gaze, breaking her train of thought. The White Wolf gently places his large paw onto Rosetta's head to offer a comforting pat. Rosetta comically complains about the heavy gesture, but the wolf jokingly claims it is his favorite foot. Rosetta grabs his face and firmly demands that he stop treating her like a pet. Rosetta suddenly pulls the giant white wolf into a tight, warm hug, leaving him completely stiff. Smiling tenderly, Rosetta whispers how cute her beloved wolf companion is while holding him close. Rosetta asks if he remembers anything, but his vague memory of her voice makes her feel uneasy. Alarmed by his words, Rosetta quickly pulls back and addresses him formally to break the intimacy. Rosetta threatens him by clenching her fist, asking if it sparks any familiar memories of her. The sweating white wolf quickly backs down, admitting he wants to avoid her menacing clenched fist. Rosetta happily squeals at his cuteness, while the prince complains about being held so tightly. Rosetta teasingly suggests physical contact, leading the highly flustered prince to desperately stammer out a protest. Lenoa gulps nervously, sweating under a fierce interrogation in a dimly lit study. Leonard threatens Lenoa with running laps if he lies, prompting Lenoa to claim Rosetta wanted a dog. Leonard narrows his bright green eyes, delivering a terrifying glare that sees right through the lie. A loud thump sounds as Leonard punches Lenoa in the stomach for trying to lie to him. Lenore begs for mercy, explaining he saved the prince's life, but Leonard declares he has lost his mind. Leonard demands the truth, warning that Rosetta will be in grave danger if she harmed the prince. Lenoa nervously defends his sister to his brother, insisting she didn't do anything wrong. Narration explains why Leonard doubts Lenoa, noting Rosetta and Lenoa's past impulsive and hedonistic habits. Lenoa passionately lists how Rosetta cared for the prince, feeding him and treating his wounds. Lenoa defends Rosetta's reform, prompting a surprised and skeptical response from his brother. Lenoa explains Rosetta's business ventures and her diligent care of the prince to his brother. Lenoa notes that even the Baron highly respects Rosetta, celebrating her financial business success. Leonard remains deeply skeptical of his sister's sudden business success and apparent reformation. Narration explains how Rosetta's changes have made Lenoa's life much more enjoyable and stable. Lenoa warns Leonard not to offend Rosetta and disrupt her newfound path of goodness. An exhausted Lenoa excuses himself and departs, leaving Leonard to contemplate Rosetta's change. Leonard is left alone, quietly questioning if Rosetta has truly changed for the better. Leonard sits alone on the sofa, his expression calm yet deeply contemplative and focused. Rosetta asks Leonard why he is staring, finding his silent gaze intensely uncomfortable while she pets the wolf. Rosetta coordinates a brief nap schedule with the sleepy white wolf before their scheduled walk. The white wolf leaps gracefully onto the plush red bed to take a nap. Rosetta humorously questions whether the luxurious bed belongs to her or to the white wolf. Narration reflects on how their initially hostile relationship transformed into one of genuine trust. Leonard gestures for Rosetta to join him as he sits on the plush sofa. Sitting opposite Leonard at the table, Rosetta asks him what he wants to discuss. Leonard directly asks Rosetta what she has been doing in recent days. Rosetta claims she only cared for the prince, inwardly wondering if something bad happened. Leonard hums in deep thought, prompting an anxious Rosetta to ask what is wrong. Leonard smiles and tells Rosetta he has heard many positive things about her lately. Surprised by his compliment, Rosetta promises she will continue to live a good life. A dark-haired maid serves tea, her hands visibly trembling as she approaches Rosetta. The maid looks incredibly anxious and sweaty, clearly terrified of being near Rosetta. A sudden nervous clink sounds as the maid's hand shakes violently, rattling the teacup. Rosetta watches the maid, noting just how incredibly nervous and terrified she appears. Spilling the tea, the maid gasps in absolute horror and frantically begs for forgiveness. Disgusted by the clumsy display, Rosetta calls the maid an idiot and commands her to leave. The terrified maid quickly flees the room, slamming the large double doors behind her. Leonard expresses his deep happiness over Rosetta's newfound maturity, saying their parents will love it. Rosetta looks slightly uncomfortable and breaks a sweat at her brother's sincere praise. Standing up, Leonard teasingly remarks that her habit of speaking without thinking remains unchanged. A gentle hand reaches out and affectionately pats Rosetta on her bright red hair. Rosetta childishly pouts as her older brother playfully teases her with a head pat. Smiling warmly, Leonard notes that her petulant habit is still exactly the same. Rosetta watches her brother depart, her expression softening as a quiet darkness creeps in. Narration shifts the scene to that evening when Rosetta's blood was thoroughly analyzed. The physician explains that Rosetta's highly concentrated blood acts as a powerful stimulant for demons. Narration confirms that Rosetta's blood is a potent stimulator and nourishment source for demons. The white wolf sheepishly admits that he was telling the truth about her smelling delicious. The physician explains that the prince is naturally affected because he possesses demon blood. Narration reveals that the prince inherited demon blood from his grandfather, who entered the human world. The mixed-race child born from the union possessed extraordinary intellect and physical strength. Silhouetted against the starry night sky, the hybrid child recognized his immense power. Believing himself superior, he decided that his rightful place was on the imperial throne. The powerful hybrid child successfully seized the throne, becoming the first Idris family emperor. Narration explains that during his coup, he killed the wolf defending the imperial family. A glowing blue sword stands impaled through the slain wolf, stained in deep red blood. Narration explains the history of the imperial curse, which turns the emperor's sons into wild wolves on full moon nights. Narration notes that the transformation initially reversed after 2 weeks, returning the prince to normal human form. However, the transformed prince spent too much time as a wolf, eventually dying at his own children's hands. Sitting in the parlor, Rosetta reflects on the fading lineage and the lack of cursed children born since then. Rosetta realizes that if the prince cannot overcome the curse, he might permanently become a wild beast. Rosetta comments on the tragic fate of Sahel, noting that desperation drove his aggressive behavior. Sitting together, Nanabi and Rosetta tease the white wolf about how he previously viewed Rosetta as prey. Rosetta privately notes that while the wolf still acts hungry around her, it is better than before. Leonard discusses the urgency of restoring the prince's form and asks Nanabi about finding the elusive witch. Leonard urges the group to hasten their search, warning that they are running out of time. The red-haired young nobleman stands silently with crossed arms, looking worriedly at the ongoing discussion. Nanabi stands quietly beside the silent, majestic white wolf as Leonard's stern instructions sink in. Rosetta quietly agrees with the gravity of the situation as she reflects on their next steps. Rosetta's glowing teal eye narrows with deep resolve as she contemplates the difficult path ahead. She recalls how the prince's demeanor has become significantly gentler compared to their initial cold encounter. Walking through the lavishly decorated corridor, Rosetta and the white wolf stroll together under the chandelier. The grand exterior of the duchy stands peaceful, reflecting Rosetta's hope that this quiet life continues. A sudden loud shout of stop rings out as a startled maid drops her freshly washed linens. Rosetta angrily scolds the hungry white wolf, demanding he stop trying to chew on her hand. Rosetta sighs, admitting her attempt to manage his diet for his health only made him hungrier. The white wolf haughtily turns his head away from a large bone, refusing to chew on it. A sharp scratching sound echoes as the wolf's sharp claws tear at the elegant red wallpaper. With a swift flick of his tail, the mischievous white wolf knocks a decorative vase over. The agitated white wolf sinks his teeth directly into the expensive pink drapes of the parlor. Rosetta stands frozen in sheer disbelief, staring blankly at the extensive damage the wolf has caused. Rosetta reaches her absolute limit, her face contorting with rage as she demands he stop his mischief. Furious at the destruction, Rosetta yells again for the troublesome beast to immediately stop. Rosetta delivers a swift disciplinary punch directly to the stubborn white wolf's head. Rosetta fiercely chides the wolf for his bad habits, while the proud prince indignantly defends his imperial status. Rosetta angrily commands him to start acting like a true prince instead of a spoiled animal. The white wolf internally gripes about being treated like a dog before letting out a loud howl. Throwing his head back, the white wolf lets out a powerful, echoing howl inside the parlor room. The howl suddenly dissolves into a pathetic whimper, leading Rosetta to realize her blood's magic has worn off. White wolf barks loudly for more blood, but Rosetta flatly rejects his demands with crossed arms. But Rosetta coldly walks away, declaring his lack of voice as punishment for his terrible misbehavior. Desperate and angry, the white wolf growls loudly and pounces directly toward Rosetta. With lightning reflexes, Rosetta's hand shoots out and firmly grabs the pouncing wolf by his scruff. To the wolf's utter shock, Rosetta effortlessly hoists his massive white body directly over her shoulder. Rosetta calmly decides to throw the troublesome beast onto the nearby bed to contain him. A loud crash sounds as Rosetta accidentally hurls the white wolf straight into the parlor wall instead. The dazed white wolf slowly slides down the cracked wall, leaving Rosetta thoroughly startled by her own strength. Rosetta nervously checks on the prince, hoping she didn't injure him with her accidental display of power. A menacing growl vibrates from the shadows as the wolf's glowing yellow eyes narrow with intense anger. The giant double doors burst open with a loud bark as the enraged beast begins his pursuit. A frantic chase begins as the white wolf barks and pursues Rosetta through the mansion corridors. The scene shifts to the serene indoor greenhouse garden filled with lush greenery and elegant furniture. Rosetta dashes into the greenhouse, panting heavily as she tries to escape the furious imperial beast. Hearing a rustle behind her, Rosetta turns her head in sudden surprise as petals swirl around. The massive white wolf leaps forward, pinning Rosetta to the grassy ground amidst a flurry of pink petals. Rosetta firmly holds the barking wolf's muzzle back, reiterating that she will not give him any blood today. Rosetta firmly refuses to give the white wolf her blood, demanding he back down. Exhausted and weakened, the giant beast staggers backward onto the grass in defeat. The wolf sits down and sulks pitifully, whimpering in disappointment. Rosetta stands her ground, reminding him that he cannot always get what he wants. She decides to use this opportunity to discipline him and fix his bad habits. Walking into the forest, Rosetta promises him blood if he behaves and performs a task. She reveals a glowing golden ball in her hand, ready to throw it. Rosetta hurls the ball into the forest, commanding the energetic wolf to fetch it. The eager white wolf dashes down the grassy hill, chasing after the flying ball. Sitting under a tree, Rosetta grows worried as the wolf takes too long to return. The wolf suddenly leaps from the bushes, proudly carrying a small white rabbit in his mouth. Rosetta stands up in surprise as the wolf approaches her with his unexpected catch. She looks closely, realizing he has brought back a live animal instead of the ball. The majestic wolf proudly runs back, gently carrying the trembling rabbit. He drops the shaking white rabbit on the grass, waiting for Rosetta's reaction. Amused, Rosetta asks if this peace offering is his way of trying to make up. Rosetta squeals with delight, finding his attempt to please her incredibly adorable. She forgives him, offering her hand, which the happy wolf eagerly licks. The two walk together peacefully through the lush forest, their bond growing stronger. The wolf silently admits his mistake, resolving not to repeat his misbehavior. Rosetta apologizes for her harsh treatment and decides to release the rabbit back to nature. She wonders where he learned such a thoughtful gesture, but the wolf remains silent. Rosetta gently pets his head, teasingly suggesting his future companion will love this side of him. Back in the parlor, Rosetta agrees to feed Sahel more if he commits to exercising. Her irritation flares when she recalls him waking her up far too early. Rosetta sternly tells him he must run laps, worried about him gaining weight from overeating. She frets over his growing size when a sudden noise at the door startles them. Sensing potential danger, Rosetta prepares for a confrontation despite being unarmed. Rosetta slowly reaches out and opens the heavy wooden door to investigate. She bursts through the door with the white wolf alert by her side. They surprise a young maid who is caught mid-bite with stolen bread. Startled and terrified, the maid falls heavily to her knees on the floor. The trembling maid desperately bows, begging Rosetta for forgiveness. She tearfully explains she was stealing food to feed her sick, starving brother. Rosetta listens quietly, remembering the maid's recent clumsy mistakes around the estate. Rosetta reflects on the maid's suspicious behavior, finding the situation increasingly interesting. Rosetta feels conflicted, sweating under the weight of her own suspicion. Watching the fragile girl beg on the floor fills Rosetta with pity. She compares the starving maid to her well-fed, pampered wolf companion. Rosetta asks the terrified young maid for her name, who stutters in response. While cooking over the warm stove, Rosetta asks if she regularly starves herself. The maid denies it, though the sniffing wolf remains skeptical of her claim. Rosetta prepares a warm, hearty bowl of stew for the hungry girl. She generously offers the fresh meal to the maid, inviting her to eat. The terrified maid screams in panic, begging not to be eaten by them. Rosetta stares in absolute bewilderment, realizing ridiculous rumors are spreading about her. She recalls seeing other maids feed the wolf, realizing they thought he was a man-eater. Rosetta reassures the maid that the pampered prince only eats high-quality meat. As the maid happily eats, Rosetta gently inquires about her brother's mysterious illness. The maid reveals that doctors have declared his condition a terminal, inexplicable disease. Rosetta asks Hannah about her family, and Hannah tearfully reveals that only she and her brother remain. Heavy, dark silence settles over the room as the sad reality of their situation sinks in. Rosetta stands in the kitchen, lost in deep thought as she prepares food for the struggling maid. Rosetta reflects on how uncannily similar Hannah's tragic family background is to her own past life. Night falls over the duchy, casting a quiet, starry glow across the peaceful city landscape. Through the grand arched window of the mansion, the brilliant starry sky shines peacefully. Lying in bed, Rosetta remains wide awake as she finds herself unable to stop thinking about Hannah. Sitting by her bedside, the white wolf notices Rosetta's restless state and asks if the maid is bothering her. The wolf gently places his paw over Rosetta's hand, comforting her as she denies being exceptionally kind. The prince in wolf form looks at her softly, silent but offering reassuring comfort in the quiet room. Rosetta privately questions her own kindness, feeling guilty for treating the crying maid so coldly at first. Rosetta recalls how she left Hannah kneeling on the hard floor while questioning her. Rosetta realizes Hannah's appearance and dark hair strongly remind her of her past self. Exhausted from overthinking, Rosetta tosses and turns in bed before finally drifting off to sleep. She tells herself her concern is merely a trivial curiosity about the young maid's circumstances. The next morning, Marina brushes Rosetta's red hair while advising her not to rub her swollen eyes. Marina explains that despite the butler sending a skilled physician, they could not determine Hannah's brother's illness. Rosetta realizes that if a top doctor found no cause, the boy's disease might be completely untreatable. Rosetta asks Marina about Hannah's age, noting how incredibly small and scrawny the girl appears. Rosetta is utterly shocked to learn Hannah is 17, only a single year younger than herself. Massaging her temples, Rosetta tries to dismiss these distracting worries, resolved to focus on her own affairs. Seeking help, Rosetta asks the skilled magician Nanabe if she would examine Hannah's terminally ill brother. Nanabe readily agrees to help, prompting Rosetta to suggest they meet to depart after dinner. As Rosetta walks down the corridor, she feels the persistent gaze of the silent white wolf behind her. Rosetta warns the wolf to stay quiet, but he smugly insists on accompanying her for protection. The haughty prince playfully demands she protect him instead, claiming he is far too weak and fragile. Irritated by his dramatic antics, Rosetta reminds him of his previous energetic boasting and demands his cooperation. The white wolf blinks in sudden surprise, caught off guard by Rosetta's unyielding stance. The wolf abruptly complains of feeling tired, hoping to dodge his promise to go on a walk. Rosetta smiled knowingly, fully anticipating that the lazy beast would try to wiggle out of his exercise. Without hesitation, Rosetta effortlessly hoists the massive white wolf over her shoulder to force him along. Meanwhile, Hannah knocks politely on the grand double doors of Rosetta's chamber. Rosetta opens the door, greeting the young maid who has arrived as requested. Rosetta introduces Nanabe as a powerful magician who can hopefully cure Hannah's sick brother. Hannah bows gratefully, while Rosetta asks Nanabe if she requires any special preparations before they leave. The late afternoon sun casts a warm orange glow over the bustling city streets. A grand horse-drawn carriage sets off from the estate, heading toward Hannah's home. Arriving at the old brick house, Rosetta steps out feeling slightly nauseous from the carriage ride. Looking up at the worn building, Rosetta feels an unsettling wave of familiarity wash over her. Entering the dusty house, Rosetta quickly dismisses Hannah's apologies about the dirt and asks for her brother. Hannah leads the group toward the wooden staircase, explaining her brother is in a second-floor room. A soft creak echoes through the silent house as they carefully ascend the wooden steps. Hannah presents her bedridden brother, Eugen, to Rosetta and Nanabe in the dimly lit bedroom. Hearing the boy's name, Rosetta gasps in absolute shock, her eyes widening with sudden realization. The frail, dark-haired boy lies quietly in bed, identified as Eugen Mel. Rosetta recalls the original story, visualizing the powerful blonde saintess Liliana. She remembers that in the original tale, Eugen became Liliana's apprentice, bringing her directly to the Duke. Rosetta breaks into a cold sweat, realizing why this old house felt so incredibly familiar. She stands stunned, realizing this is the exact place where the Saintess Liliana was originally discovered. A promotional banner appears, encouraging readers to support the translators of the series. The starry silhouette represents Eugen being treated by Liliana after Lord Matave ordered her to retrieve him. Nanabe examines the bedridden boy while Rosetta and Hannah watch anxiously, hoping for a diagnosis. Rosetta expresses deep worry about the boy's critical state, fearing he might pass away at any moment. Nanabe looks up with a sudden, wide-eyed look of shock and realization. Nanabe excitedly explains that she found the cause of the boy's illness, identifying it as a mana blockage. Text boxes warn that while novice magicians often suffer from mana blockage, it can be fatal if left untreated. Nanabe points out that releasing the accumulated mana will cure him, marveling at how he survived a year. Nanabe warns that leaving such a massive amount of blocked mana untreated would cause a severe disaster. Nanabe stops mid-sentence and calls out to Rosetta, noticing her sudden distraction. Rosetta stands in tense silence, her mind racing as she processes the critical situation. Rosetta desperately wonders what this means for Sahail's future if the timeline has been altered. A sudden sharp rustle sounds as Rosetta tightly clenches her fist in frustration and anxiety. Rosetta reflects on the necessary conditions required for Sahail to successfully regain his human form. She realizes that the presence of the saintess Liliana is absolutely crucial for Sihal's cure. Rosetta's bright blue eyes narrow as she makes a difficult decision about the unfolding events. Hannah asks hesitantly if something is wrong, noticing Rosetta's sudden and intense quietness. Hannah begins to tear up, overwhelmed by the fear of losing her beloved brother. Rosetta feels conflicted, sweating under the weight of her own suspicion. Rosetta gazes at the majestic white wolf standing before her in the dimly lit room. Rosetta notes that Sahel has been quietly observing her actions from the very start. The white wolf stares back at her with his sharp, knowing golden eyes. Rosetta kneels down before the white wolf, addressing him with deep respect. Rosetta promises the wolf that she will do whatever it takes to achieve her goals. Rosetta holds the white wolf's face, her gaze filled with resolve as she reassures him. A quiet, heavy breath escapes Rosetta as she steels herself for the path ahead. Rosetta tenderly kisses the white wolf's forehead, sealing her silent vow to protect him. Rosetta hugs the wolf, worrying about what will happen if Liliana is never found. Fearing future regrets, Rosetta calls out to Nanabi to proceed with the treatment. Rosetta accepts that since she modified the original plot, she must take full responsibility. Nanabi smiles and readily agrees to Rosetta's request, while Hannah looks on with hope. Hannah tearfully thanks Rosetta, deeply grateful for the unexpected salvation offered to her brother. Night falls over the mansion, bringing a quiet, starry stillness to the estate. Rosetta tosses and turns in bed, completely unable to sleep due to her racing thoughts. Rosetta devises a plan to keep Eugen's cure a secret while spreading calculated rumors. The white wolf wags his tail nearby, questioning Rosetta's sudden interest in the sick boy. The wolf questions her actions, pointing out that treating Eugen alters the necessary path to curing his own curse. The wolf demands reassurance that she will still break his curse as she promised. Rosetta kicks her blankets in frustration, instantly regretting her impulsive decisions. Rosetta explains that she only learned of Eugen's identity today, admitting her curiosity got the better of her. The wolf gently lies next to her, comforting her by calling her decision reasonable and trusting her promise. Rosetta looks up at him with soft, wide eyes, deeply touched by his words of trust. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Rosetta vows to find the magician, even if she has to go to hell. Well, that's one way to solve a cosmic plot hole. Rosetta casually goes fishing at the literal gates of hell. The wolf wraps himself around her protectively as they drift off to sleep, accepting her reassurance. Rosetta wakes up in the quiet morning, finding herself alone under the warm covers. A soft click sounds as the heavy doors close, with only the tip of a white tail slipping out. Walking down the corridor, the white wolf wonders why Rosetta is so sincere and kind to him. He looks down the hallway, questioning if she merely views him as a loyal dog. The wolf notes how she touches and kisses him without a second thought because of his pet persona. He warmly remembers the gentle kiss she pressed to his forehead, feeling a deep, complex affection. The majestic white wolf blushes a deep red, still deeply shaken by the memory of Rosetta's gentle kiss. The white wolf wiggles his head in embarrassment, realizing how humiliating it is to be handled by someone 3 years younger. He recalls Rosetta's radiant beauty and gentle smile as she reached out to comfort him. Looking out at the starry night, the wolf worries that growing any closer to her would be a terrible mistake. He steps forward as a sudden, quick step sounds, fearing that getting too attached to her will lead to a point of no return. Hannah runs quickly down the pathway, calling out to the white wolf by his pet name. Hannah asks if Rosetta is still asleep, while the wolf internally notes her frailty and contrasts it with Rosetta's terrifying strength. With a quick turn, the white wolf shifts his gaze away, leaving Hannah surprised by his coldness. Hannah walks alongside him, curious if he is strolling alone and what his personal favorites might be. Hannah excitedly questions whether he prefers meat, fish, or perhaps various types of sweet fruits. A startled cough escapes the wolf when Hannah asks if his favorite thing is actually his lady. The white wolf snaps back in a panic, loudly asserting that Rosetta is absolutely not a food source. Hannah gasps in pure disbelief, freezing in place with her hand pressed against her mouth. The white wolf glares ahead in sudden horror, realizing he made a massive blunder. He stands frozen in panic, deeply regretting that he let his guard down and spoke directly in front of the maid. Hannah remains completely dumbfounded, staring at the wolf in absolute silence. With a cheerful clap, Hannah happily assumes he simply meant he cares for Rosetta deeply as a companion. The white wolf narrows his golden eyes, staring back at her with intense suspicion. The wolf confronts her directly, noting that she did not seem surprised by his ability to speak. Sweating nervously, Hannah confesses that she actually discovered his secret the previous evening. Hannah recalls overhearing the wolf speaking with Rosetta by the carriage, expressing deep worry about her health. The white wolf steps closer, demanding to know if she has discovered his true identity. Hannah nervously asks if he is a wolf deity, and the wolf decides letting her believe that is for the best. The wolf berates himself for letting his guard down during a moment of peace. Hannah addresses him respectfully by his pet name, while the wolf warily wonders what she will ask next. Hannah clasps her hands together, waiting eagerly for him to answer her query. Standing proudly under the starry sky, the majestic white wolf boldly claims that Rosetta likes him best. The wolf immediately panics over his embarrassing boast, though he quickly rationalizes that Rosetta truly cherishes him above all else. Hannah inquires about what kind of snacks Rosetta prefers, making the wolf wonder about her favorite treats. He instantly visualizes fresh red apples and a warm golden apple pie. He remembers Rosetta sitting on a red velvet couch, eagerly preparing to eat a fresh pastry. He fondly recalls how she thoroughly savored the delicious apple pie just a few days ago. He compares her adorable eating habits to those of a busy squirrel or a cute rabbit. He gasps in surprise at his own thoughts, realizing with a blush that he has fallen hopelessly in love. Hannah cheerfully thanks him for the helpful information and bids him farewell as she runs off. Watching her leave, the wolf concludes that the innocent, simple-minded maid is definitely not the queen's spy. The white wolf heads back toward the dark entrance, noting that it is almost time for Rosetta to wake up. A peaceful morning sky transitions from bright daylight to soft, hazy clouds. A steady tap of his paws echoes softly as he walks quietly through the carpeted corridors. The wolf suddenly freezes as loud, chaotic shouting echoes from further down the hallway. He runs forward in concern, noting that the interior of the mansion seems to be in complete disarray. Staring at the empty staircase, he panics and wonders if assassins have invaded and where Rosetta might be. He dashes down the grand staircase, brushing past a breathless and panicked manservant. The butler gasps in shock, unable to say anything as the wolf rushes by. A sharp click of a shoe sounds as a fast-moving figure approaches the hall. The white wolf slides to a halt, gasping in pure shock at what lies ahead. Rosetta sprints frantically down the hallway in her nightgown, desperately calling out his name. The wolf drops his jaw in utter scandal, shocked that she would run through the halls in her nightgown. She lifts him up with a sudden hoist, wrapping her arms tightly around his massive neck. Rosetta clings to him with desperate relief, while her personal maid watches the dramatic reunion with awkward amusement. Rosetta walks down the corridor with the white wolf as palace servants watch them pass. A loud voice demands to know where Rosetta is going, dressed only in her nightgown. The white wolf angrily questions Rosetta's lack of outerwear, while she demands to know where he went. Rosetta explains she became incredibly anxious when she realized he had suddenly vanished from her sight. Rosetta admits she caused a massive commotion throughout the mansion trying to search for him. The majestic white wolf stands quietly, feeling deeply embarrassed and moved by Rosetta's frantic worry. The white wolf slowly shifts his weight, his tail brushing softly against the ornate carpet. The white wolf parts his jaw in mild shock, completely speechless at her overwhelming devotion. Rosetta demands to know why he is suddenly staying silent during their intense confrontation. Rosetta and the white wolf lock eyes in a silent, comical staring contest. The white wolf frantically tells himself to stay sane because Rosetta is his friend's sister. Rosetta teasingly asks the white wolf if his early morning stroll was to lose weight. Rosetta pinches the white wolf's side, playfully warning him that he might gain weight later. Rosetta giggles while squeezing his squishy belly, ignoring his quiet demands to stop. The white wolf walks away, grumbling to himself about her mischievous and teasing nature. Lying on the bed, the wolf sulks while Rosetta asks if he is upset. Rosetta playfully flatters the wolf, but he proudly counters that he is much more handsome. A soft rustle sounds as Rosetta gently pats the white wolf's head to comfort him. Rosetta cuddles him by calling him handsome, realizing this is how to appease a puppy. The wolf solemnly asks if she will still praise his looks once he becomes human. Rosetta reassures the wolf that her true feelings for him will remain completely unchanged. Rosetta gazes down at him with an incredibly sweet and affectionate smile. The white wolf smiles softly, deeply satisfied and comforted by her heartfelt reassurance. Two hands gently clasp together amidst a cascade of beautiful falling white blossoms. A vision of a handsome silver-haired prince holding Rosetta promises an even deeper bond. Rosetta sleeps peacefully on the red bed with the white wolf resting beside her. The scene transitions smoothly as a decorative chapter division screen appears. Rosetta faces a solemn realization that she must bear the burden of her actions. Holding her head in frustration, Rosetta laments the unexpected consequences of her decisions. Rosetta sits in frustration while the red-haired man wonders how their target hit so well. Rosetta regrets altering the original plot as Liliana remains hidden despite her rumors. The white wolf silently steps closer to Rosetta as she sits on the couch. Rosetta lets out a soft gasp of surprise as she notices his sudden approach. The white wolf rests his head on Rosetta's lap, prompting her to call his name. The white wolf looks up at Rosetta with big, innocent, and sparkling golden eyes. Overwhelmed by his adorable behavior, Rosetta happily squeals about how cute he is. The white wolf asks Rosetta what is troubling her, and she admits it is complicated. Rosetta promises to capture Liliana, while the wolf playfully compliments her exceptional hunting skills. Rosetta tilts her head in confusion, wondering what she could have caught previously. The white wolf looks at her and boldly declares that she has caught him. Rosetta stands frozen in pure shock, questioning if she misheard his unexpected confession. Rosetta tells him his joke went too far, but the wolf insists he is serious. Chibi Rosetta gets flustered, protesting that her only target is the missing Liliana. Chibi White Wolf sits comically inside a glass fishbowl, questioning if this is her territory. Chibi Rosetta comically tips the fishbowl over, yelling at the wolf to go away. The wolf tells her to take responsibility, while Rosetta yells that she must fish elsewhere. The red-haired man angrily demands to know why they're being so noisy. The red-haired man scolds Rosetta, questioning her sanity for wanting to date a wolf. The red-haired man observes Rosetta and the wolf, muttering suspiciously about their unusual closeness. The red-haired man refuses, but the wolf easily bribes him with the wine sour. The red-haired man narrows his sparkling yellow eyes as a sudden realization strikes him. With a sudden slam, the red-haired man places his hand on the table to greet Rosetta. Pointing dramatically, the red-haired man asks Rosetta about her ideal type of romantic partner. Rosetta details her specific preferences for a romantic partner, emphasizing devotion over material wealth. Both the red-haired man and the white wolf stand in completely stunned silence. Rosetta casually wonders if a noble duke would find her massive wealth highly advantageous. Rosetta enthusiastically declares her plans to secure her target and heads straight to the wedding hall. The red-haired man comically reacts with complete outrage, threatening to disrupt her plans. Rosetta sweats nervously as the red-haired man comically threatens to make a chaotic scene. The red-haired man sternly warns the white wolf against dining with any strangers. A swift thwack sounds as the white wolf slaps the red-haired man's arm with his tail. While the red-haired man nurses his arm, Rosetta asks the white wolf about his ideal type. The white wolf describes his ideal partner as someone strong enough to protect themselves. Rosetta confidently resolves to break the magical curse no matter what it takes. Rosetta muses that Liliana's healthy nature does not fit what Sihel wants in a partner. When asked about appearance and personality, the white wolf specifies red hair and green eyes. Rosetta is utterly shocked by how direct and transparent the white wolf's description is. Flustered and blushing, Rosetta addresses the prince in a state of sheer disbelief. The white wolf is comically petrified as Rosetta assumes his ideal type is her brother. An image of a strong, handsome man with red hair and green eyes appears. Rosetta warns that her brother might not be friendly, prompting a murderous reaction from the wolf. The red-haired man bursts into uncontrollable laughter, leaving Rosetta looking highly annoyed. Rosetta stands thoroughly bewildered by the bizarre turn the conversation has taken. The tea time session officially comes to an end, shifting the scene forward. Frustrated by the exchange, the white wolf bites the red-haired man's leg before leaving. The white wolf retreats to his room in a foul mood after the encounter. Rosetta discusses the search for traceable remnants with the concerned silver-haired woman. A soft creak sounds as someone quietly stands at the door of the room. Rosetta warmly welcomes Eugene, noting how remarkably fast his physical condition has recovered. Bowing respectfully, Eugene promises to repay Rosetta for her life-saving kindness. Rosetta wonders about Eugene's true motivations, recalling his willingness to sacrifice his life. A gentle clatter sounds as Eugene carefully sets a teacup on Rosetta's desk. A soft clack sounds as Rosetta holds the cup filled with a pink liquid. Rosetta's eyes widen as she spots something unexpected reflected in her vision. With a sudden snatch, Rosetta firmly grabs Eugene's wrist to inspect his bracelet. Rosetta suddenly stands up in shock, causing Eugene to ask what is wrong. Rosetta urgently demands to know where Eugene obtained his lily-decorated string bracelet. Eugene explains a stranger gave him the bracelet, confirming to Rosetta that Liliana has arrived. Rosetta questions Eugene about the exact day he received the mysterious lily bracelet. Rosetta asks to examine the bracelet, and Eugene complies, hoping it will help her. Rosetta takes the bracelet, desperately hoping she can use it to track down Liliana. Nanabi activates her tracking magic, confirming she can successfully locate their target. Rosetta smiles eagerly, looking forward to sharing the wonderful news with the prince. A quick patter of footsteps echoes as Rosetta runs down the grand corridor. Rosetta excitedly bursts open the doors, calling out to the prince with joy. Rosetta is met with complete silence as she finds the bed entirely empty. Worried, Rosetta calls out again, scanning the silent, empty room for any trace of him. Rosetta realizes with deep frustration that the disobedient wolf has run away once again. Rosetta shouts in panic from the stone balcony wall, leaving Eugene completely shocked by her behavior. Eugene calls out to Rosetta, attempting to draw her attention back to him. Rosetta addresses a silver-haired servant boy named Alan, catching him by surprise. Rosetta notes that Alan has been smiling more lately, whereas he used to tremble with fear around her, making him bashfully stammer in agreement. Scratching his neck nervously, Alan asks Rosetta if she has seen Shasha, mentioning that the wolf and a maid went out the back door earlier. Overwhelmed with shock, Rosetta's eyes widen as she desperately wonders if there is a maid getting too close to her beloved white wolf. Rosetta imagines a horrifying scenario where a cheerful maid feeds the white wolf a giant bone treat while the wolf happily accepts. The scene shifts to a top-down view of the courtyard where the white wolf and the maid stand close together. The white wolf complains to the maid about how Rosetta still treats him like a mere puppy, while the maid secretly wishes she could be his owner. Rosetta overhears the wolf telling the maid it was a mistake to ask her, prompting Rosetta to step forward as the maid nervously greets her. With a stern and intense expression, Rosetta demands to know what the two of them were talking about. The terrified maid stammers an apology for speaking to the wolf, while the white wolf grumpily tells Rosetta to leave her alone. Rosetta approaches the sulking white wolf, teasingly asking if he is still grumpy and refusing to make eye contact with her. Reassuring the trembling maid, Rosetta gently pats her shoulder and praises her delicious apple pie, expressing her complete trust. The black-haired maid looks incredibly relieved and moved to tears by Rosetta's kind and reassuring words. The cheerful maid happily bids them farewell, urging them to enjoy their chat as she runs off. Rosetta waves goodbye to the maid while the white wolf sits beside her with a highly unimpressed expression. Rosetta asks what they were hiding, but the wolf refuses to say, leaving her annoyed by his sudden secrecy. Rosetta offers a stunning, warm smile that radiates pure affection and charm. Dropping a black string, Rosetta confidently promises that better news will arrive soon. The white wolf stares intently at her hand with glowing yellow eyes, looking deeply intrigued. With a swift movement, the white wolf bites her gloved hand, boldly declaring his preference for girls over her brother. Rosetta stands completely dumbfounded, blankly questioning what the white wolf could possibly mean by his sudden declaration. Rosetta recalls her previous teasing remark to the wolf about his apparent interest in her brother Renoa. Chibi Rosetta hugs and pets the chibi white wolf, quickly explaining that she was only joking about her brother. Stroking the wolf's head, Rosetta asks if this is why he ran away, but he proudly counters that he knew she would follow. White Wolf explains he went to see Nanabi, prompting Rosetta to grumble that he should have taken her along. Looking down affectionately, Rosetta softly tells the wolf that he behaves just like a little child. Opening his mouth wide, the white wolf calls Rosetta's name with an intense gaze. Rosetta smiles in surprise as the white wolf suddenly snaps his jaws directly toward her face. Rosetta's eyes widen as a sharp bite lands on her lips, prompting a sudden cry of pain to escape her mouth. Rosetta's sudden exclamation of pain echoes through the silent courtyard. Holding her lips, Rosetta complains about him biting her, but the wolf declares it is her punishment for saying mean things. A trickle of blood runs down Rosetta's chin as the white wolf boldly asks if he can lick her lips. Rosetta reluctantly agrees on the condition that he stops once the bleeding ends, letting him gently lick her lip. Blushing furiously, Rosetta wide-eyed realizes that this intimate gesture is basically a kiss. Chibi Rosetta gets flustered, thinking she only wants to kiss him in his handsome human form, since he is currently just a puppy. The white wolf looks up at her, curiously asking if her blood will still taste good after he turns back into a human. But sighing in defeat, Rosetta tells him to do as he wishes, and the wolf suggests going for a walk since they are already outside. The peaceful, sun-drenched forest path stands quiet and green as the scene transitions. Dressed in active hunting gear with her hair tied up and a sword at her waist, Rosetta eagerly suggests making a bet. The white wolf asks about the stakes of the bet, and Rosetta declares that the loser must grant the winner's wish. Chibi Rosetta warns him against wishing for anything strange, but the white wolf confidently agrees as they prepare to start. With a sudden, swift step forward, Rosetta kicks off the race, prompting the wolf to accuse her of cheating. Rosetta dashes ahead with a determined grin, enjoying the head start she gained. Running at full speed, Rosetta realizes she needs this little trick to beat the fast white wolf. With a powerful leap, the white wolf easily overtakes her, leaving Rosetta to complain about his lack of consideration. Watching him speed ahead, Rosetta runs behind, sweating and wondering why he is taking the game so incredibly seriously. A sudden, sharp rustling noise echoes from the dense green bushes beside the path. Rosetta abruptly halts and grips her sword, staring intently toward the suspicious bushes. Rosetta turns around in pure shock, gasping as her eyes widen at an unexpected presence behind her. A blue-feathered beast with fierce yellow eyes and a canine body emerges from the forest, growling menacingly at her. A sudden, sharp caw echoes as a flock of dark birds bursts from the forest. The blue-feathered beast lets out a fierce screech, staring with menacing golden eyes. Holding her sword, Rosetta wonders if her blood attracted this beast to an ordinary mountain. Rosetta charges at the giant blue-headed beast, readying a swift strike with her blade. Rosetta grins with absolute determination, narrowing her green eyes as she prepares her attack. With a swift, powerful strike, she cleanly slices through the formidable neck of the beast. Black blood splatters onto the forest path as Rosetta steps back to avoid the spray. Rosetta stands shocked, realizing the monster is still alive even after its head was cut off. Rosetta is taken by surprise as a massive torrent of black fluid erupts before her. Gritting her teeth, Rosetta resolves that she has no choice but to fight back. Raising her blade, Rosetta prepares to test if her next attack will finally work. Catching her breath, Rosetta tightly grips her sword, preparing for another intense round of combat. The massive beast finally collapses and dissolves into black smoke at Rosetta's feet. Hearing a sudden rustle in the bushes, Rosetta turns her gaze with alert surprise. The white wolf suddenly bursts through the green bushes, urgently calling out Rosetta's name. Surprised, Rosetta halts her sword midair and gasps as she recognizes the white wolf. Rosetta warns the white wolf that he nearly startled her into attacking him. The white wolf remarks that he expected her to cry but is impressed by her self-sufficiency. Looking thoroughly annoyed, Rosetta demands to know how he managed to find this location. The white wolf explains that the strong scent of blood made finding her incredibly easy. Stepping onto the black remains, the white wolf notes that she somehow destroyed the core. The white wolf questions how she killed it without knowing about its core, guessing she just sliced everything. Rosetta sheepishly admits that she simply hacked at the beast until it finally stopped moving. The white wolf bursts into hearty laughter, thoroughly amused by her straightforward combat method. The white wolf praises Rosetta, calling her terrific for defeating the monster through sheer force. Chibi Rosetta finds his clapping compliment embarrassing, even if it was meant as praise. Rosetta asks what kind of monster it was, prompting the wolf to present two possibilities. The white wolf taps his paw, preparing to reveal the second, more concerning possibility. The mention of the monster reminds Rosetta of a key detail from the original story. Rosetta recalls that the Empress is a witch whose control is limited to birds like crows. Rosetta ponders the connection between the bird-like beast and the Empress's specific magical limitations. The white wolf explains that the weak monster she defeated was merely a fake creation. The white wolf suggests heading back down the mountain to inform Renoa first. Narration reveals their descent halfway down the mountain would not end in a safe return. Rosetta screams in absolute panic and frustration as another unexpected obstacle derails their plans. Confronted by more giant crows, Rosetta despairs over having to fight again so soon. Rosetta grumbles that searching for the course takes time, reminding him he was the target. When the wolf tries to look cute, Rosetta firmly rejects his attempts at manipulation. The white wolf gives a flat, unimpressed glare after his cute act is shut down. The white wolf suddenly addresses Rosetta as his queen, catching her completely off guard. Shivering with disgust, Rosetta frantically asks if the wolf has completely lost his mind. The white wolf shamelessly begs his queen to defeat the monsters and hug him. Rosetta dryly questions his fear as he easily crushes a monster bird beneath his paw. Rosetta warns him to stop impersonating Shasha, noting there is only one bird remaining. Miffed by her harsh words, the wolf crushes the residue, mockingly claiming it was an accident. Time passes as daylight fades, painting the sky in deep shades of crimson and blue. Upon their return, Renoa immediately gathers his knights and heads up the mountain to investigate. Nanabi joins Renoa to contain the threat while a hand begins sketching a simple drawing. Expressing her frustration at being unable to help, Rosetta sketches while the wolf asks what she is drawing. Rosetta beams with joy as she holds up her incredibly simple and childlike wolf drawing. The white wolf internally denies the terrible drawing represents him as Rosetta asks for his opinion on her work. The white wolf flatly refutes the drawing, firmly stating he does not possess such weird features. Rosetta proudly defends her artwork as a job well done, leaving the white wolf questioning her seriousness. Hearing a sudden knock on her room door, Rosetta turns and bids the visitor to enter. Eugene urgently bursts through the grand double doors, immediately calling out to his lady. Rosetta asks Eugene what happened, and he delivers the crucial news that he has located Liliana Manu's whereabouts. Rosetta stares in disbelief, eagerly asking Eugene to confirm if the news is indeed true. Eugene explains that Liliana is located outside the duchy, but fortunately remains within the northern region. Eugene warns that Liliana will be taken away at dawn, prompting Rosetta to resolve that she must set off immediately. The heavy wooden double doors click shut, leaving Rosetta alone with her thoughts. The white wolf casts a sharp glare at Rosetta's back as she walks across the room. Gently cradling his chin, Rosetta addresses the white wolf respectfully by his royal title. Rosetta promises the wolf he will be normal tomorrow, privately reflecting that her strange routine is finally ending. Rosetta silently realizes that the close days she spent with Sahel in his wolf form are officially over. Rosetta reflects that she never could have spoken to Sahel so intimately had he not become a wolf. Sensing her sudden melancholy, the white wolf calls out Rosetta's name with a worried expression. Rosetta admits that while she should be happy his wait is over, she finds the parting somewhat unfortunate. Looking out at the quiet castle, Rosetta admits she grew more attached to him than she ever expected. Resting beside Rosetta in her bed, the white wolf points out that her eyes look unusually red today. Rosetta explains she is memorizing his face on their final day together, leaving the white wolf highly confused. The white wolf dramatically asks if he is about to die, prompting Rosetta to let out a hearty laugh. Rosetta reassures him he won't die, but explains this is the last time she will see his wolf face. Rosetta tenderly plants a gentle kiss on the white wolf's nose as a bittersweet goodnight and farewell. Closing her eyes with a serene smile, Rosetta whispers a soft goodnight as she drifts to sleep. The white wolf's golden eye glows intensely in the darkness of the bedroom. Swirling stellar energy wraps around Rosetta as she stands alone in a dark, dreamlike void. Rosetta wakes up feeling a crushing weight on her body, wondering if the wolf fell asleep on her. Rosetta's hand reaches out and claws at the soft red sheets of her bed in confusion. Rosetta blindly gropes a firm, muscular male chest, completely bewildered by the sudden change in texture. A low voice belonging to a silver-haired man wearing a black collar warns Rosetta to stop touching him. Rosetta gasps in complete shock as she looks down at the shirtless silver-haired man lying beside her. Rosetta's eyes widen in sheer shock as she processes the unexpected presence in her bed. The stunning silver-haired man offers a dazzling smile and casually wishes Rosetta a very good morning. Pink roses bloom beautifully, framing Rosetta's hand as she trembles in the bright morning light. Clutching her nightgown, a stunned Rosetta hesitantly asks the handsome silver-haired man if he is indeed the emperor. Rosetta stares in absolute awe, internally questioning if this breathtakingly handsome man is actually Sahel himself. Rosetta's vibrant cyan eye trembles as she tries to comprehend the magical transformation before her. Blushing furiously, Rosetta panics over his complete lack of clothing and demands that he cover himself immediately. Sahel tells Rosetta to calm down, but she hysterically retorts that remaining calm is absolutely impossible. Rosetta demands to know how he suddenly turned human, but Sahel admits he woke up already transformed. Rosetta deduces that the Empress's poison was cancelled out, rendering their search for Liliana completely pointless. Standing tall, wrapped in a blanket, Sahel calls out to Rosetta, who answers him back politely. Sahel asks if he is handsome. Rosetta instinctively agrees before privately noting his half-naked look seems rather perverted. Sahel gets embarrassed by her intense gaze, while Rosetta wonders where his former wolf plumpness disappeared to. Backing away, Rosetta insists the touching was an accident and promises to fetch her brother Renoa. Rosetta steps out of the bedroom, quietly shutting the heavy double doors behind her to escape. Sliding down the door in utter panic, Rosetta clutches her face, wondering how to handle this madness. Rosetta recalls that Sahel was supposed to meet the therapist first to trigger his return to human form. Banging her head against the wall, Rosetta panics that the original novel's plot has completely shattered. Rosetta stares ahead with a worried expression, wondering if his main objective has somehow already been achieved. A conceptual vision illustrates the opposite path where the two finally meet together in an embrace. Another conceptual illustration depicts the peak of their connection, where they ultimately become one. Rosetta contemplates her strange situation, noting that neither event occurred and even her farewell last night did not make her feel loved. The shirtless, silver-haired prince walks down the grand hallway while Rosetta watches from the doorway. The silver-haired prince drapes a blue cloak over Rosetta's shoulders, warning her not to walk around the palace in her pajamas. Rosetta defensively retorts, telling His Highness not to walk around half-naked and questioning what he will do if someone sees him. Rosetta swiftly exits the room while loudly demanding that the prince stay inside and wait for her return. The heavy double door slams shut, leaving the shirtless, silver-haired prince standing alone in the room. Rosetta fans her blushing face, thoroughly surprised by the prince's sudden appearance, and resolves to quickly wake up Rachnoa. Rosetta knocks on the blue bedroom door, politely asking if she can enter the room. Rosetta enters the quiet bedroom, observing that Renoa is still asleep past 11 o'clock and commenting that his sleeping habits are even worse than hers. Rosetta approaches the bed where the red-haired boy is peacefully sleeping under a patterned blanket. With a loud crash, Rosetta violently wakes up the screaming red-haired boy in his bed. Renoa sits up in utter bewilderment as Rosetta calmly explains that the prince has finally returned to his human form. Rubbing his cheek, Renoa sleepily questions if the magician has already arrived to cast the spell. Renoa freezes in sudden realization, his golden eyes wide with shock. Renoa hesitantly asks if she was in bed when the prince woke up, to which Rosetta directly answers yes. Rosetta explains her shock, recalling how she woke up that morning to find herself face-to-face with a bare chest in her own bed. With a sudden tap, Renoa reaches out and grabs his sheath sword from the wall. Rosetta's sweat drops in concern, asking Renoa what exactly he is planning to do with his weapon. Renoa wears a terrifying, enraged grin as he repeats in disbelief that the prince was in her room and in her bed. With a sharp sliding sound, Renoa draws his sword, his rage peaking as he mutters about the prince being completely topless. Enveloped in a dark, murderous aura, Renoa furiously declares his intention to kill the crown prince. A stylized promotional screen warmly invites readers to support the original publishers of the series. Renoa points his sword in fury, shouting that while he didn't mind before because the prince was a dog, he cannot accept him sharing a bed as a human. Rosetta frantically struggles to hold Renoa back, screaming that nothing happened and reminding him that she hasn't even had her coming-of-age party yet. Rosetta disarms Renoa by grabbing the sword hilt, prompting a startled cry from the red-haired boy. Rosetta confidently holds the sword, instructing Renoa to calm down and go fetch some clothes for the guest. Renoa crosses his arms in annoyance, complaining that the prince now has the audacity to ask for his clothes. Rosetta reasons with Renoa, warning him that a naked man staying in her room will inevitably spread highly scandalous rumors. Renoa begrudgingly walks off to get the garments, while Rosetta cheerfully suggests they hurry up and go greet the prince. Renoa cracks his knuckles with a terrifying smile, maliciously agreeing that they indeed need to go say hello. A loud bang echoes as the double doors are forcefully kicked open. Rosetta stands in quiet concern, realizing it would be a major problem if Renoa clashes with the Crown Prince, hoping they won't fight. The silver-haired prince sits on a red sofa, looking relaxed and deeply in thought. Sahil smirks, resting his face on his hand as a quiet chuckle escapes him. Sahil smiles warmly, thinking to himself that he never expected to see her make such a cute face. Close-up of Sahil's yellow eyes as he reflects on his successful plan. Beneath a glowing full moon, Sahil's thoughts echo that he has successfully marked his target. Sahil sits up in bed, looking at his hands in astonishment. Looking down at the sleeping Rosetta, Sahil realizes with a shock that he has finally returned to his original human self. Surrounded by blooming purple flowers, Sahil reflects on how his emotional mark was successfully placed on Rosetta while she slept. Sahil recalls a past memory of Rosetta kissing Shasha the wolf, wondering if her kiss is the true reason behind his return to human form. Looking at his reflection in the glass, Sahil smiles confidently, declaring to himself that he can start his journey from this point. Reflecting on their past, Sahil notes that he had been nothing more than a beloved pet to her until this moment. A warm memory shows Rosetta embracing the silver-haired prince tightly against a soft background. Sahil's yellow eye gleams with absolute focus as he vows to approach her slowly and cautiously until she is completely in his arms. Against a dark, misty background, Sahil's ominous final thought states that she will not be able to escape him. Sahil turns around with a brilliant shirtless grin, warmly calling out for Rosie to join him. Renoa arrives carrying the change of clothes, stopping in his tracks to exchange a tense, silent glare with the shirtless prince. Looking thoroughly annoyed, Renoa demands to know why Sahil is there, questioning if he did anything to Rosetta. A shirtless Sahil calmly retorts that Rosetta was actually the one who did something to him. A brilliant golden light bursts through the grand doorway, shifting the scene's focus. Rosetta crosses her arms, deeply contemplating what will happen between Liliana and Sahil now. Rosetta wonders if they will fall in love as written in the original novel. Visualizing chibi versions of Sahil and Liliana together, Rosetta nervously hopes the main characters succeed. Rosetta smiles softly, her brilliant cyan eyes shining with quiet, contemplative curiosity. Fully dressed in a white shirt and black trousers, Sahil looks incredibly handsome, earning a compliment. Sahil asks if Rosetta likes his style, prompting her to laughingly reply while Renoa chokes. Renoa points out that Rosetta lied about stopping by the duchy, warning of the Empress's suspicions. Flopping heavily onto her bed, Rosetta exhaustedly declares that the butler can handle those matters. Lightly patting the mattress, Rosetta bids Sahil to stop standing and sit beside her. Sahil peers down at Rosetta, questioning if she still views him as her pet dog. Sahil smoothly sits beside her, teasingly suggesting he has no reason to decline her invitation. Renoa suddenly wedges himself directly between them on the bed, dryly thanking them for the space. Renoa pulls out a glowing magical orb, announcing he is calling his brother right now. Light flares from the magical communication device as Renoa prepares to connect the call. Ronald's face appears in the orb, expressing relief that Sahil has successfully returned to human form. Sahil smiles smugly at the orb while Renoa watches him with an unimpressed look. Ronald reports that the Empress has been secretly spreading troubling rumors ahead of the Christmas party. Ronald desperately begs Sahil to return to the palace and resume his duties immediately. A frantic servant screams through the orb, threatening to resign if Sahil does not return. Sahil smiles confidently, completely unfazed by the chaotic demands coming from the communication device. Sahil smiles deviously, plotting his grand return on the day of the birthday banquet. A hand holds dripping blue monster slime, revealing that the Empress sent a fake beast. Ronald explains that the Empress released the fake monster, nearly putting Rosetta in danger. Looking deeply concerned, Ronald asks if Rosetta is unharmed after the encounter. Rosetta laughingly reassures him it was just a fake monster, while Renoa watches sheepishly. Ronald praises Rosetta and Renoa for a job well done, expressing his deep gratitude. Renoa furiously yells at Ronald, demanding to be taken away from the duchy too. Ronald quickly hangs up the call with a brief farewell, leaving Renoa completely ignored. An awkward, heavy silence falls over the bedroom as the three of them sit quietly. Rosetta breaks the silence, calmly announcing that it is time for them to go. Sahil gazes at her with a soft expression and gently agrees to accompany her. Renoa desperately calls out to Ronald in despair as Rosetta and Sahil walk away. Renoa's furious scream echoes loudly throughout the entire castle, shaking the building on its foundations. A spilled bottle of wine lies on the table as gulping sounds fill the air. Rosetta dines with her companions, wondering why Sahil decided to stay as Renoa drinks heavily. Rosetta watches in disbelief as Renoa chugs wine directly from the bottle without eating. Rosetta quietly glances toward the other side of the long dining table. Rosetta notices Renoa intensely glaring at Sahil, wondering if he is trying to embarrass him. Sahil casually eats pie, telling Renoa to stop glaring since they will be close now. Renoa angrily calls Sahil a loyal dog, but Sahil smugly attributes his behavior to recently being a wolf. Rosetta breaks into a sweat as Sahil cheerfully reminds him he was a dog until yesterday. Renoa grumbles that Sahil was much better as a dog, while Sahil casually dismisses it. Startled, a sweat-dropping chibi Rosetta quickly responds when Sahil suddenly addresses her by name. Framed by beautiful blue flowers, Sahil strikes a handsome pose and asks Rosetta if he looks attractive. Rosetta smiles brightly and immediately agrees that he is indeed incredibly handsome. Renoa facepalms in annoyance, muttering that Rosetta only cares about handsome faces, while Rosetta defends her high standards. Sahil laughingly offers to take Renoa to the wine cellar, but Renoa snaps back that he won't be fooled. Renoa looks surprised as Sahil offers him as much wine as he desires. Sitting at the dining table, Renoa groans in frustration, while Rosetta despairs over the awkward situation. A hand forks a piece of pie as Sahil asks if they are finally finished speaking. Sahil offers a piece of pie to Rosetta, affectionately asking her to eat it. Rosetta opens her mouth with an excited gasp, happily accepting the pie from him. Jealous of their closeness, Renoa quickly tries to feed Rosetta himself to assert his brotherly role. Rosetta's face tightens with pure annoyance as her brother continues to push her buttons. Suddenly, a loud crash echoes through the dining hall as physical chaos erupts between them. Rosetta stands furiously over Renoa, demanding to know if he has lost his mind as he groans. From the floor, Renoa loudly protests that he cannot stand watching them flirt right in front of him. Rosetta can only let out an exhausted sigh at her brother's ridiculous and dramatic behavior. Rosetta reaches down to help her brother up, reminding him that she warned him before. Rosetta grabs Renoa's collar, aggressively clarifying that he is completely misunderstanding the nature of their relationship. Sahil quietly watches the chaotic sibling bickering unfold before him with a silent, calculating gaze. Renoa quickly surrenders to his sister's wrath, laughing nervously in hopes of calming her down. Rosetta tosses her brother aside, casually suggesting to Sahil that they rid themselves of the madman. Rosetta playfully winks as she politely addresses Sahil, checking on his reaction to the chaos. Sahil reacts with soft surprise, silently contemplating a rather drastic solution of his own. Dark thoughts cross Sahil's mind as he decides he simply wants to dispose of Renoa elsewhere. A chilling aura radiates from Sahil, sending a shiver of dread straight through Rosetta's trembling eyes. Rosetta asks in absolute shock after Sahil casually suggests disposing of her brother right in the room. Rosetta stands frozen in disbelief, processing the terrifying intensity she just felt from the Emperor. Rosetta questions her own eyes, wondering if Sahil truly looked ready to murder her brother just now. Leaving the dining hall behind, Sahil walks away with a heavy and silent air about him. Rosetta follows behind, deeply wondering how on earth their quiet life devolved into such madness. Opening the door, Nanabi the therapist gasps in sheer shock upon seeing Sahil's human form. Sahil casually sits back, confirming the sudden and unexplained transformation that occurred overnight. Nanabi questions the timing of his return, while Rosetta privately decides to ask about the heroine first. Rosetta asks about Liliana's whereabouts, and Nanabi reveals that the young lady is currently waiting nearby. Eager to proceed, Rosetta stands up and prompts Sahil to join her for the meeting. Sahil gazes after Rosetta, a quiet but intense determination reflecting in his golden eyes. Sahil reflects on their complicated bond, hoping she will eventually grow accustomed to his true human self. The invisible threads of fate draw tighter as the moment of destiny finally approaches them. The group enters the guest room, finding themselves face to face with the beautiful blonde-haired Liliana. Liliana bows with perfect etiquette, offering a polite and respectful greeting to her distinguished guests. Liliana introduces herself with a warm smile, stating she has arrived in response to their summon. Rosetta is instantly dazzled by Liliana's beauty, noting how remarkably pure and radiant she appears. Rosetta offers a friendly smile and explains that they urgently require her unique assistance. Rosetta asks Liliana to examine Sahil for poison, but he suddenly drops his head onto her shoulder. Sahil affectionately rubs his head against Rosetta, leaving Nanabi and Liliana utterly dumbfounded. Rosetta panics over his sudden intimacy, while Nanabi wonders why the Emperor is acting so shamelessly before guests. Sahil weakly begs Rosetta to hold his hand, though Rosetta tells him to hold Liliana's hand instead. Striking a tragic pose, Sahil pleads with Rosetta to hold his hand because he is terrified. Sahil desperately claims he is a coward, asking Nanabi to verify his weak constitution to Rosetta. Nanabi awkwardly plays along while internally mocking how a legendary war hero could pretend to be afraid. Having lost the Battle of Wills, a defeated Rosetta ultimately relents and takes his hand. Rosetta gazes down, reflecting on how she only ever saw his fluffy wolf paws before today. Rosetta is suddenly struck by the elegant feel of his long, warm human fingers. Sihale blushes beautifully, showing a rare and tender smile now that he has her hand. Rosetta worries his red face means he is in pain, but Sihale murmurs it is entirely because of her. Rosetta eagerly asks the healer for her diagnostic results. Liliana reassures Rosetta that the Emperor has no trace of poison and is completely healthy. Sihale confidently confirms his well-being, while Rosetta expresses relief now that his health is verified. Liliana curiously inquires about the mechanism behind his sudden physical transformation. Liliana bluntly labels the Emperor as a monster due to his extraordinary physical constitution. Liliana gasps in sudden realization as she stares forward in complete disbelief. The group sits quietly in the elegant parlor as sunlight filters in from the garden. Rosetta and Sihale exchange cautious glances, waiting for the conversation to proceed. Liliana looks down with a solemn expression, contemplating her next words carefully. Sihale lightly questions her vision, prompting Liliana to declare she can perceive much more. Sia warily asks what else the blonde healer is able to perceive. Liliana reveals she can see the unstable magical connection binding the two of them. Rosetta gasps in complete confusion upon hearing about their unstable connection. An intense silence fills the room as everyone processes the healer's shocking revelation. Inabi silently questions the meaning behind the words while Rosetta mentally admits her ignorance. Sihale suddenly grabs Liliana's face, warning her to keep her distance despite her talent. Sihale darkly threatens Liliana, warning that her outspokenness could easily cost her life. Rosetta internally screams in absolute despair, wondering why the destined lovers are acting so hostile. Sihale coldly warns that baseless assumptions are better left unspoken. A sweating, terrified Liliana desperately offers her apology to appease the angry Emperor. Sihale dismissively sits back on the sofa, letting the tense atmosphere linger in the room. Nanabi tentatively speaks up to break the awkward silence that settled over them. A reassuring hand lands gently on Liliana's trembling shoulder to offer comfort. Nanabi calmly suggests that they exit the room to give everyone some space. Rosetta watches with a heavy heart as the blonde healer is guided toward the door. Liliana silently walks away, her departure marked only by the quiet echo of footsteps. The heavy wooden doors click shut, leaving the remaining pair alone in silence. Rosetta demands to know why he was so harsh, but Sihale simply dismisses her concern. Rosetta holds her head in frustration, stressing that the two will never grow close. Rosetta heavily sighs, doubting the healer would ever accept a bond with someone so arrogant. A hand suddenly reaches out and firmly grips Rosetta's wrist, interrupting her thoughts. Rosetta spins around in surprise as the Emperor tightly holds her hand, stopping her from leaving. Rosetta firmly insists on seeing the healer out so she can apologize properly. Sihale watches her go with a vulnerable, longing look shining in his golden eyes. Rosetta tells him that his behavior caused this, demanding a simple thank you instead. Rosetta resolves to personally thank the healer for making the trip to help them. Rosetta turns to leave, her elegant red hair catching the light amid blooming flowers. Running out into the sunny garden, Rosetta loudly calls out to the blonde healer. Liliana bows politely, offering a sincere apology for any trouble caused during the audience. Rosetta waves it off, insisting she is the one who should apologize for the Emperor's behavior. Liliana praises Rosetta's warmth, prompting Rosetta to gently defend the Emperor's true nature. Rosetta excuses his bad mood, while Liliana understandingly blames her own sudden assumptions. Liliana assures her that she is completely fine, bringing a relieved smile to Rosetta's face. Liliana lifts her pale hands, staring at them as she senses a strange energy. Rosetta politely extends her hand to offer a warm farewell gesture to the healer. As their fingers meet, a brilliant, magical golden light suddenly flares between them. Liliana's eyes widen in sheer astonishment at the mysterious power vibrating through their touch. Rosetta suddenly reveals a shocking truth about the healer's unique blood attracting demonic entities. Liliana stares back in silent confusion, completely blindsided by Rosetta's unexpected knowledge. Rosetta urgently grabs Liliana's hands, leaving the blonde healer completely overwhelmed by the revelation. Liliana gently nods her head, offering a soft and understanding smile under the bright sunlight. Rosetta anxiously recalls the novel's original plot, questioning if Liliana's sweet blood tempted Sihale to attack. Rosetta voices her confusion, admitting she does not know what Liliana was previously involved in. Liliana sighs with a sad expression, reflecting on how difficult her life has been. Liliana advises keeping a distance from the Emperor, leaving Rosetta completely bewildered as she questions why. Liliana explains that although Rosetta's blood currently acts as a healing medicine for him, danger looms. Rosetta's eyes widen in sheer shock as she absorbs the healer's heavy words. The healer delivers a chilling warning that Rosetta's blood will eventually turn toxic to him. Rosetta stands frozen on the pathway as an ominous dark shadow looms over her. The scene transitions with a foreboding note as green leaves rustle against the blue sky. Rosetta walks back inside with a heavy heart, deeply troubled by the dark prophecy. Exhausted, Rosetta collapses face down onto her bed and lets out a heavy, worried sigh. The healer's warning about them becoming poison to each other echoes ominously in her mind. Rosetta anxiously questions what kind of severe damage her blood could possibly cause to Sahel. Rosetta wonders why the blonde healer felt compelled to warn her so desperately and sternly. Terrifying thoughts cross Rosetta's mind as she wonders if there is a plot to kill her. Rosetta reflects that the Emperor must break his curse in order to remain safe and sound. Surrounded by cherry blossoms, Rosetta resolves that she must survive and thrive in this world. Ciel peeks into the room, asking Rosetta if she's doing all right. Sahel asks if the healer spoke strangely, while Rosetta privately laments parting on bad terms. Rosetta sighs, pained by the realization that side characters inevitably drift away from each other. Sahel gently pats Rosetta's head, telling her to ignore the healer's nonsensical words. Rosetta internally screams, shocked that he can dismiss the advice of a magically gifted heroine. Rosetta suddenly whips her head around, her vibrant red hair swaying with her movement. Rosetta demands to have a serious talk, catching a startled Sahel completely off guard. Crawling closer on the bed, Rosetta tells him she was shocked by his face earlier. Rosetta aggressively demands to know what is wrong with her face, terrifying a sweating Sahel. A vein pops on Rosetta's forehead as her anger reaches its absolute limit. Sahel frantically begs her to wait as Rosetta grabs his shirt to retaliate. Rosetta hurls a pillow at him, screaming that he was supposed to say no. A loud, satisfying crash echoes through the bedroom as the pillow strikes its target. Ciel collapses onto the mattress, leaving Rosetta to gasp in sudden surprise at her actions. Rosetta instantly regrets her aggressive outburst, realizing she has made a huge mistake. Ciel complains of a dislocated shoulder, prompting a panicked Rosetta to apologize profusely. Sahel suddenly bursts into a cheerful, triumphant grin, completely dropping his weak act. Sahel shamelessly asks if someone can give him a comforting shoulder massage. Rosetta sighs and decides she must take responsibility since she caused the injury. Rosetta offers a terrifyingly sweet smile, promising to personally fix his shoulder for him. Rosetta tightly grips his arm and shoulder, preparing to forcefully pop it back. A loud, bone-cracking sound echoes through the bedroom as Rosetta exerts her strength. Sahel groans in sudden, agonizing pain as his shoulder is forcefully popped back. A heavily sweating and pained Sahel gasps that Rosetta is truly unbelievable. Rosetta's eye widens in surprise as she is suddenly caught off guard. In a sudden, swift motion, Ciel pulls Rosetta down onto the bed with him. Sahel smiles victoriously, whispering that he has finally gotten her exactly where he wants. Sahel happily bounces in celebration, while Rosetta questions the nature of his earlier groans. Rosetta gets serious, prompting Sahel to focus and explain the bizarre events from earlier. Sahel solemnly recites the healer's warning that they will eventually become poison to each other. Rosetta complains that despite asking for a clear explanation, the healer only spoke in riddles. Sahel grumbles about his dislike for the healer, frustrated by her evasive warnings. Sahel admits that her blood has a stimulating effect on him as he grips his head. Sahel reassures Rosetta that he will not consume her now that he is human, while Rosetta warily advises him to stay safe. Rosetta internally panics over the terrifying prospect of him developing a dangerous addiction to her blood. Sahel nonchalantly suggests that they can simply deal with any potential addiction or wild episodes as they arise. Rosetta stares at him in sheer disbelief, dumbfounded by his incredibly carefree attitude. Sahel references how Rinoa used to scold Shasha during her wild phases, leaving Rosetta utterly bewildered. Sahel cheerfully points out that she has actually praised him many times before, intensifying her shock. Sahel suddenly grabs Rosetta's face, demanding that she look directly at him. Rosetta demands that he stop whispering in her ear and speak to her normally instead. Sahel poses a hypothetical scenario regarding what should happen if he gets into another accident. Sahel solemnly requests that Rosetta use her own hands to punish him if he ever loses control. Rosetta questions her noble status, but Sahel reiterates she is the only one capable of stopping him. Rosetta mentally concedes, quietly remembering that she does have some solid beast-taming experience on her resume. Sahel worries about tarnishing her reputation, but Rosetta honestly agrees, prompting him to pat her head affectionately. Sahel refuses to distance himself over unverified warnings, and Rosetta silently shares the exact same sentiment. Rosetta firmly insists that distancing themselves is still the right decision for both of their sakes. Sahel asks if staying is fine if he protects her, and Rosetta agrees provided her life is guaranteed. Sahel flatly refuses to leave, leaving Rosetta frustrated by his stubborn refusal to take the easy way out. Sahel tells her to stop overthinking and to simply ignore the issue concerning her blood. Rosetta acknowledges his basic logic but remains highly skeptical about such a simplistic solution. With a sudden clap of his hands, Sahel abruptly brings their serious conversation to an end. Sahel warmly extends his hand and invites Rosetta to join him for a walk outside. a close-up of his hand extended invitingly amidst a beautiful backdrop of white flowers. Rosetta fondly takes his hand, calling him a tease as she accepts his invitation. The scene transitions to the sunlit garden, vibrant with blooming red and purple flowers. Rosetta runs ahead in delight, marveling at the abundance of blooming flowers throughout the garden. Rosetta steps into the grand glass greenhouse filled with lush greenery and hanging chandeliers. Sihel calls out for her to wait, holding a light-colored picnic blanket in his hand. Sihel asks Rosetta to wait a moment, prompting her to turn and ask what is happening. Sihel warmly explains that he was preparing to lay the blanket down on the grass for her. Rosetta looks up at him with a touched and pleasantly surprised expression on her face. A close-up shows the light cloth being shaken out and spread over the green grass. Sihel looks down at her with a gentle, focused gaze shining in his golden eyes. A soft whoosh sounds as the picnic blanket flutters gracefully down onto the ground. The picnic blanket is laid flat on the grass, ready for them to relax. Rosetta beams with joy, patting the blanket and inviting him to sit down beside her. A sudden blush warms his face, proving that even the mighty emperor isn't immune to butterflies. Sihel sits down and flusteredly buries his face in his hands, making Rosetta feel incredibly awkward. Rosetta carefully weaves a delicate flower crown, admitting she is rusty since she hasn't made one in years. Sihel curiously inquires about her creation, but Rosetta playfully tells him he will have to wait and see. Sihel looks completely stunned as the delicate flower crown is placed gently upon his silver hair. Rosetta bursts into a bright, joyful laugh, delighted by how adorable he looks. Sihel remarks on receiving his coronation crown early, but Rosetta tells him not to compare it to her creation. Rosetta asks where he is going as Sihel suddenly stands up and begins to walk away. Sihel walks off into the lush garden, leaving her sitting alone on the picnic blanket. Sihel calls her name, causing a surprised Rosetta to look back over her shoulder. Sihel slides a beautiful handmade flower ring onto her finger as his own special gift. Rosetta stares at the ring in absolute wonder, questioning where he could have learned such a skill. Rosetta offers her warm thanks, prompting an embarrassed Sihel to ask if she wants another one. Rosetta teases him about liking the ring, but a grumbling chibi Sihel insists it looks far too shabby. Rosetta rests her hand against her cheek, looking thoughtful as she reflects on their conversation. Sihel looks completely confused, admitting that he has absolutely no idea what she is talking about. Rosetta asks if she smells good while cooking, prompting Sihel to explain her changing scent. Rosetta secretly finds relief in her scent before curiously asking him what Lillian smells like. Sihel looks utterly horrified and disgusted at the mere suggestion of smelling another woman's scent. Rosetta secretly reflects on how dismissively he refers to the main heroine of this world. A quiet tension settles over the pair as they sit side by side on the grassy lawn. Rosetta lets out a heavy sigh, resolving to address the matter at the upcoming birthday party. Sihel firmly demands her hand to naturally initiate some light skinship, prompting her internal skepticism. Rosetta takes his hand but playfully questions if he has prior experience with many other women. Sihel stares back in stunned, nervous silence under her intense and probing gaze. Rosetta flatly calls him a liar, highly skeptical of his smooth and natural gestures. Rosetta probes about his dating history, but the stubborn emperor boasts about his exceptionally high standards. Sihel nervously twitches his fingers near her dress, softly suggesting himself as a suitable partner. Rosetta dismisses his suggestion with laughter, leaving a flustered Sihel silently wishing she would notice him. A bright, dazzling smile spreads across Sihel's face as he softly agrees with her words. Sihel triumphantly declares that Rosetta can never marry, prompting her to contemplate a solitary future. Rosetta firmly confirms her desire to live alone, leaving Sihel frozen in utter shock. Rosetta explains that she would rather adopt a puppy than marry someone unexciting to her. A desperate shout echoes as someone frantically reminds her of his very presence nearby. Sihel bursts out in a panicked, wide-mouthed yell, completely losing his composure over her words. Sihel clutches his head in despair upon hearing her casual declaration that they are merely friends. Sihel huffs and turns away in a sulk while Rosetta looks at her ring. Shocked to her core, Rosetta dramatically demands to know why they aren't considered friends. Rosetta's eyes widen with sudden worry as she anxiously ponders the true nature of their relationship. Rosetta thoughtfully suggests that they are colleagues who have successfully endured difficult hardships together. Sihel whips around in frustration, angrily protesting her unilateral decision about their relationship status. Rosetta asks for his suggestion, but she finds his desire for intimacy incredibly picky. Sihel intensely interrogates Rosetta, demanding to know if she still views him as a pet. Rosetta leaps to her feet, frantically assuring him that she fully recognizes his humanity now. Sihel quietly prepares to ask another question, narrowing the gap between them. Sihel stands tall and questions who she was referring to, but Rosetta evasively replies. Rosetta accidentally blurts out her reluctance to let him go, immediately regretting her slip-up. Si-hae gently pinches her lips together, cutting off her panicked explanations with a playful gesture. Rosetta touches her tingling lips in shock as Si-hae teasingly warns her to get over him. Si-hae dramatically turns on his heel, declaring a temporary silent treatment before walking away. A bright new day begins inside the palace, accompanied by a sudden probing inquiry. Rosetta teasingly points out that her companion seems to have suffered yet another harsh rejection. Rosetta gazes sadly, silently lamenting that their precious time together is rapidly running out. The red-haired youth dismissively requests to be left completely alone until his departure for school. The youth questions her gentle touch as she holds her cup of tea. Rosetta sadly points out that attending the institute will prevent them from seeing each other. The youth assumes they will go together, but Rosetta completely catches him off guard. The youth reacts in sheer disbelief as Rosetta casually questions why she would even attend. Rosetta finally remembers the upcoming coming-of-age ceremony, realizing it follows the Emperor's birthday celebration. Rosetta spits out her tea in absolute shock as a sudden revelation hits her. Panicked Rosetta begs him to lower his voice before he bursts her eardrums. The youth violently shakes Rosetta while reminding her of her previous vows to live at the institute. The youth flatly refuses her suggestions, determined not to live his life that way. The red-haired youth stares at her in deep disbelief, noting how completely she has changed. Rosetta insists she is not sick, while her companion notes she looks perfectly fine. Someone asks Rosetta if she will remain at the estate until the upcoming coming-of-age ceremony. Rosetta confirms her stay, settling the matter while the youth reassures her she won't be lonely. The red-haired youth questions the purpose of attending the institute, dreading political conflicts. Rosetta questions the Empress's reaction, and the youth warns her of the severe danger she faces. Rosetta decides not to go, realizing she would become a target for elimination in this timeline. Red-haired youth praises her intelligence while Rosetta fumes at being treated like a child. The red-haired youth happily remarks on how innocent Rosetta seems to him. Rosetta violently shakes the youth's head, angrily warning him to stop treating her that way. A sudden knock sounds at the door, catching their attention. The blue-haired Viscount politely interrupts, entering the room to speak with them. Rosetta greets the Viscount warmly as he expresses his hopes that they are doing well. The youth complains about an unwelcome guest, prompting the Viscount to acknowledge the rumors of his stay. Rosetta requests absolute secrecy regarding her presence at the estate. The Viscount falls into a stunned silence upon hearing her request. The Viscount emotionalizes over Rosetta's newfound maturity, recalling her past chaotic behavior. The Viscount triumphantly announces the successful finalization of the contract with the Acela workshop. Rosetta enthusiastically congratulates him, but the Viscount credits her entirely for the success. Rosetta humbly attributes the success to the Viscount, leaving him deeply touched. Rosetta shifts the focus, preparing to address the next crucial matter. The sudden suggestion to travel to the capital together leaves Rosetta completely frozen in shock. Both Rosetta and the youth exclaim in utter disbelief at the Viscount's sudden proposal. Rosetta demands an explanation, completely bewildered to learn she is designated as the primary responsible person. Rosetta internally panics, questioning how simply signing her name made her fully responsible. The red-haired youth asks what happened to cause such a sudden panic. The contract paper clearly displays Rosetta's name officially stamped alongside the workshop. Rosetta screams in absolute despair upon seeing her stamp finalized on the document. The Viscount logically explains that since Rosetta proposed the workshop, she must naturally lead it. Rosetta desperately begs the Viscount to take her name off the document, even by deceptive means. Rosetta frantically suggests transferring all responsibility to the Viscount immediately. The Viscount cheerfully rejects her offer, wanting no part of the responsibility either. Sparks fly as Rosetta angrily protests while the Viscount insists she will do a fantastic job. Rosetta bitterly regrets ever handing over her official stamp to the Viscount. The Viscount flinches in terror under Rosetta's ferocious, soul-piercing chibi glare. Seeing her fury, the Viscount quietly and stealthily attempts to sneak out of the room. Rosetta forcefully detains the Viscount, warning him that the Earl will definitely take action. Rosetta skeptically questions him as he presents yet another document for her review. The Viscount reveals a custom jewelry design gifted for her ceremony, though Rosetta remains outwardly unimpressed. Rosetta grudgingly admits the jewelry is beautiful, while the Viscount notes its potential marketing value. The Viscount suddenly bolts out of the room, leaving a yelling Rosetta in his wake. Rosetta stares blankly ahead, completely drained of all energy and hope. The youth mutters in confusion as Rosetta sighs about having to return to the estate. A heavy, exhausted sigh escapes her lips as she ponders her unavoidable fate. Rosetta dejectedly asks her maid Marina why things had to turn out this way. Rosetta endlessly mutters her inner conflict, torn between her hatred of the ceremony and protecting her retirement fund. Marina warmly reassures her, prompting Rosetta to reconsider attending the ceremony after all. Rosetta pumps herself up, deciding to treat the trip as a brief, minor inconvenience. Suddenly filled with explosive motivation, Rosetta vows to conquer the ceremony and make the most of it. Rosetta declares her wild ambition to devour all the food, leaving a sweat-dropping Marina speechless. An unseen speaker inquires if Marina is still in the room, and she confirms her presence. Sihale angrily storms off, declaring he won't speak to Rosetta for a while, leaving her to sigh at his lingering frustration. Rosetta stares at her clenched hand, frustrated that she has to fix a misunderstanding caused by Sihale. Rosetta and her maid Marina stand before the large golden double doors, with Marina politely calling out to see if anyone is inside. A sudden creaking sound echoes as the grand golden doors of the bedchamber slowly slide open. Rosetta pushes the door open, questioning why Marina claimed to be inside when she clearly wasn't. Rosetta's breath hitches in shock as she and Marina stare into the bedchamber with wide-eyed disbelief. Dresser drawers inside the room are pulled open, with clothes scattered in absolute disarray. Gazing at the thoroughly ransacked bedroom, Rosetta highly doubts a common thief would breach the secured Duke's residence. Rosetta quickly calls out to Marina as she turns around to investigate the sudden noise. Rosetta's eye opens wide with shock as Marina responds to her urgent call. Down the long, elegant hallway, Rosetta spots the long-haired youth Nanabi running toward them in a complete frenzy. Nanabi completely ignores Rosetta and rushes directly past them into the chaotic bedroom. Rosetta responds in a daze, completely bewildered by Nanabi's abrupt and frantic entrance. Rosetta watches in confusion as Nanabi desperately searches the nightstand drawers, frantically muttering that something is missing. Rosetta tries to get his attention, asking if he is indeed Nanabi. Nanabi apologizes frantically before running back out of the room to search elsewhere. Realizing something is terribly wrong, Rosetta instructs Marina to follow him immediately. The scene shifts to the exterior of the grand estate bathed in bright daylight. Rosetta dashes down the steps of the estate, calling out to Nanabi to explain what is happening. Panicked Nanabi reveals to Rosetta that the barrier has been broken and the chimera piece is gone. Nanabi points down the path, explaining that the intruder's traces are extremely confusing. Nanabi points toward a narrow alley, noting that the path only leads to an incinerator. Rosetta's eyes narrow as she realizes the culprit is heading there to burn the stolen evidence. Rosetta immediately takes off running toward the alley, with Nanabi and Marina frantically following behind. Rosetta and Marina run swiftly along the brick walls of the grand estate. Marina suddenly warns Rosetta that someone is up ahead near a burning bonfire. A silver-haired boy in a white shirt is shown stealthily tucking a glowing gold pouch into his shirt. Rosetta gasps in sudden realization as she spots the suspicious boy. Marina swiftly draws her daggers and throws them toward the intruder. A clean slice cuts the boy's wrist, forcing him to drop the glowing gold pouch to the cobblestone ground. The red-eyed, white-haired boy turns back, questioning who they are and what they are doing there. Rosetta gazes intensely at the intruder, instantly recognizing that he is not a servant from the Kajal family. Marina steps forward, preparing to search the area and completely block the boy from escaping. Rosetta holds up her hand, warning Marina that simple blockades won't work because the boy is actually a demon. A glowing magic circle materializes on the ground as Nanabi explains he has isolated the space to prevent collateral damage. Nanabi prepares to cast his magic, noting how exceptionally rare it is to encounter a demon in human form. Nanabi cheerfully suggests capturing and studying the demon, while a homicidal Marina insists on destroying it immediately. The red-eyed demon boy sits silently on the cobblestone floor, observing his captors. Rosetta braces herself as a tense, dark atmosphere begins to envelop the area. Sinister black shadows swirl into the air, manifesting as massive dark servants. 3 white snakes slither on the boy, hissingly discussing their plans to devour the intruders. Rosetta laughs nervously, demanding to know exactly who just spoke. One of the white snakes smiles brightly amidst cherry blossoms, gleefully identifying her. Rosetta sweat drops in utter exasperation as her companions wonder if the snakes are actually talking about her. The 3 white snakes bicker on the stone floor, trying to decide which of the 3 women to eat first. The snakes loom closely around Rosetta, claiming she looks like the absolute tastiest choice. Marina quickly steps in front of Rosetta, shielding her mistress and urging her to step back. Nanabi and Marina stand defensively in front of Rosetta, prepared to unleash their elite combat skills. The white snakes slither and hiss playfully across the cobblestones, completely unfazed by their opposition. The snakes mockingly laugh off Nanabi's magic, prompting an annoyed glare from the young wizard. Rosetta and Nanabi discuss the monsters, suspecting the Empress sent them specifically to target Nanabi. Marina confidently steps forward, offering to handle the incoming monsters on her own. Leaping through the air, Marina executes a swift and powerful physical attack on the creature. Instead of blood, a thick, dark black ooze slowly drips from the severed snake body. Completely unharmed, the 3 white snakes mockingly dare Marina to try cutting them again. Exhausted and sweating, Marina realizes physical blades are completely ineffective against the regenerative monsters. Nanabi brandishes his glowing staff, asking Rosetta where they should target next to defeat them. Rosetta's eyes narrow as she begins to suspect the true weakness of their strange opponents. Rosetta grabs a heavy metal dumbbell and hurls it directly at the snakes with immense force. The heavy dumbbell flies through the air, striking one of the white snakes squarely on its head. Rosetta, Nanabe, and Marina watch in anticipation as a massive cloud of dust rises from the impact. Recognizing the snake's vulnerability to blunt force, Rosetta and Nanabe plan their next coordinated attack. Smiling confidently, Nanabe channels his magic to summon a massive, swirling vortex of intense fire. A loud explosion echoes through the courtyard as the powerful magic spell detonates. Rosetta watches the clearing smoke, eager to see if the attack successfully defeated the monsters. Suddenly, a white snake lunges forward from the smoke and tightly wraps itself around Rosetta's arm. Rosetta winces in sudden pain as the snake bites down hard on her forearm. Thoroughly disgusted, Rosetta frantically shakes her arm to throw off the pleading, dirt-covered snake. Enraged by the bite, Rosetta forcefully slams her fist directly onto the snake's head. The other two white snakes sweat profusely, staring in absolute horror at their companion's brutal beating. Trembling with fear, the remaining snakes look completely intimidated by Rosetta's ferocious, violent reaction. The courtyard fills with the snakes' painful screams as Nanabe and Marina watch Rosetta single-handedly thrash them. Defeated white snakes curl on the cobblestone floor, completely dizzy and whimpering in pain. Rosetta dusts off her hands, complaining to her companions about how incredibly stupid the monsters are. The snakes pitifully weep on the stone floor, sobbing about how much the beating hurt. Rosetta flashes an incredibly sweet but deeply terrifying smile as flowers bloom around her. Rosetta gathers the bickering, terrified snakes in her hands, demanding to know which one of them bit her. Rosetta's bright green eyes glow with a menacing intensity as she repeats the snake's words. Rosetta stares at her bitten hand, her aura turning deadly as she focuses on the offending creature. The three white snakes freeze in absolute terror, completely paralyzed under her icy, murderous glare. Trembling and hiccuping, the terrified snakes cower as a dark, oppressive aura envelops Rosetta. Rosetta expresses her design to kill them, but a smiling Nanabe cheerfully suggests torturing them instead. Rosetta suddenly turns her head as she senses someone approaching them from behind. The silver-haired Prince Sahel arrives smiling, casually carrying a defeated purple slime monster. Rosetta questions Sahel about where he went and what kind of strange creature he brought back. Sahel explains that he found a strange boundary, investigated it, and successfully eliminated the threat. Sahel and Nanabe discuss the relationship between the defeated core and the stolen chimera piece. Sahel stands proudly, holding his sheathed sword with a satisfied and confident expression. The red-eyed demon boy suddenly clings to Rosetta's leg, provoking an immediate angry reaction from Sahel. But consumed by sudden jealousy, Sahel angrily accuses Rosetta of seeking satisfaction from other creatures. The demon boy adoringly calls Rosetta his master, prompting an irritated and loud denial from her. Rosetta gently grabs Sahel's hands, attempting to calm down his rising jealousy and anger. Sahel's anger instantly melts away as he blushes, completely dazed and pacified by her touch. Rosetta suddenly covers Sahel's mouth, frantically warning him to be quiet as something catches her attention. Rosetta quickly steps away from Sahel, warning him to keep his distance from her. Sahel rubs his forehead in frustration, deeply sighing over Rosetta's sudden and confusing behavior. Sahel decides to leave, instructing Nanabe to protect Rosetta since staying nearby would only put her in danger. Rosetta stands in quiet contemplation, surrounded by a serene background of blooming pink flowers. Under the bright blue sky, Rosetta reflects on how the beastly instincts still affect the prince in his human form. Marina suggests checking Rosetta's bite wound for poison, to which Rosetta quietly agrees. Rosetta taps the white-haired boy with her foot, asking if he is poisonous, forcing him to confess under Marina's terrifying death threat. Marina violently shakes the white-haired boy, demanding to know the poison's effects, which he tearfully reveals causes immense pain and fever. The white-haired boy desperately begs Rosetta to save him, but she unimpressively questions why she should be his master after he poisoned her. The white-haired boy gasps in shock as Nanabe's glowing magic circle suddenly binds him from behind. Nanabe cheerfully hauls the struggling white-haired boy away while ignoring his frantic demands to be let go. Rosetta silently watches as the white-haired boy is dragged away, wailing desperately for his new master to save him. Rosetta calmly accepts her feverish symptoms, but turns to ask Marina if the demon's poison will actually kill her. The scene transitions to the warmth of the Grand Estate's bedroom as Rosetta weakly sighs from her bed. Lying weak and feverish in her luxurious bed, Rosetta dramatically laments that she feels like she is actively dying. Staring up from her sickbed, Rosetta inwardly vows not just to kill the culprit, but to send him straight to the deepest hell.